resource persons for this conference. Before I go into the conference topic, let me give you a brief idea about our institute, Nagindas Khandwala College. Madam, Nagindas Khandwala College is an autonomous institute. It is a multi-faculty college which was established only in 1983. It is affiliated to University of Mumbai. At present, we offer 21 undergraduate programs, 15 postgraduate, and 51 short-term courses, with 3 research centers imparting education to over 5,000 students only in degree college. Our college has been reaccredited with A grade by NAC third cycle, and we have just submitted our SSR for the 4th cycle. It is an ISO 9001-2015 certified institution. The college has been awarded the Best College Award by University of Mumbai in 2012, the Education Excellence Award in the field of Commerce and Arts by Indus Foundation USA, and IMC Ramakrishna Bajaj National Quality Commendation Certificate in the year 2013-14. The college has been granted autonomous status from 2016-17, and from 2016, actually, our developments has no boundaries. We were ranked first among India's top 10 private higher education institutes for the best management practices and systems in the Education World India Higher Education Grand Jury Award 2021. That's not the end. We were ranked 5th in Maharashtra level by Education World magazine and 33rd at the All India level by Education World magazine. Recently, we have been ranked first at All India level in the category of New Age Study Programs in Higher Education ranking 2021-22. The conference, Reinventing Sustainable Women Empowerment Strategies in the Post-COVID-19 Scenario. In the morning, when I was just wondering, what innovative strategies can we bring to really change the status quo of this gender balance? What should actually women do differently to create a story for change? I think this conference, at the end of this conference, we will get the answers of all these questions. In fact, we need to know how to bridge the gap from both the sides, male and female, in order to attain a balance. I feel, my personal feeling is that women need flexibility at various stages of life. Maybe today's conference will definitely be a great learning experience for all of us when we hear from all the resource persons. I welcome you, madam, once again, and all the best to Women's Study Center for organizing this conference. Thank you.
Thank you for your inspirational words, ma'am. It's a matter of pride to be a part of this legacy. The webinar is about empowering women, but admiration for women empowerment comes from men as well. We have such strong pillars of strength in our institution. I invite Vice Principal of Edit Section, Professor Vijay Kumar Suchak, to guide us with his words of inspiration. Over to you, Suchak, sir.
Thank you, Amrita, for empowering me. You've done a very good beginning.
Thank you, sir.
Things well begun is almost half done. You have made the stage rolling, and I'm sure at the end of the day, this webinar will throw definitely lots of insights to take home.
Thank you, sir.
Respected Director, Madam, Dr. Mrs. N.C. Jose, Madam Principal, Professor Dr. Moshmi Datta, my Vice Principal colleague, Professor Dr. Mona Mehta, key speaker of the day, Srimati Rekha Pandey ji, other resource persons, Swati Barua ji and Debjani Madam, Dr. Kavita Kalkoti, Dr. Preeti Tripathi, the persons behind today's webinar, along with their team members, all the heads of the departments and coordinators of various sections of self-finance, all my colleagues and dear student participants. It is indeed a heartening thing happening after a long time that we are hosting a national webinar. We have been conducting various functions. Almost every day we have one or another function. But the function of this stature was not happening and is happening after a gap of few months. And really, I'm delighted to be a part of this. I'm sure entire day's proceedings will definitely be fruitful for the attendees to take home something. I look forward to listen to Rekha Pandey ji. Amrita ji, thank you for allowing me to share some of my thoughts. My compliments and best wishes to all of you for today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed empowering. I now request the convener of today's webinar, Associate Professor Dr. Kavita Kalkoti, to talk about the program.
A very good morning to everyone. What defines a woman? What is her right? What is feminism? Why women empowerment? I'm sure all these questions crop up in our minds when we saw the title of the webinar, Reinventing Sustainable Women Empowerment Strategies in Post-COVID-19 Scenario. Feminist movements were initially targeted at the rights of women and propped up by protests and marches. Now the world order has democratized with power of communication reaching the hands of each individual, with everyone being able to voice and exercise their rights. More women are educated and aware of their duties and rights. I don't say it is enough, but it is an significant increase. Dialogues have moved from fighting for rights to empowering women. The narrative has shifted. It is about promoting women's sense of self-worth, their ability to determine their own choices. Women have shifted gears. They want now to create a conducive premise so that they can blossom to their full potential. Before the conference came to fruition, our team would deliberate about topics to select. All of us, majority being women, as you can see, are already an empowered lot. Our leaders are strong women. Deliberations would be full of involvement, heated sentiments, to empathetic observations. COVID also has sprung up on the world and been thrust upon us without warning and has wreaked disastrous impact on everyone's lives. These two pillars were the starting points of our round of talks of the conference. Unequal impacts were registered on women and men. Now is the time like never before to change the dynamics, to rewrite, rethink, reimagine, re-energize, and reinvent societal responses. Representation of women in decision-making positions right up to the individual level interventions that would benefit families and women. This is the need of the hour. Creating a corporate leadership and in charge principal, Professor Dr. Moshmi ma'am, and Vice Principals Suchak sir and Dr. Mona ma'am offered us the wind beneath our wings with their wisdom and insights. No one can work in isolation. Without them, we would never have succeeded. As convener of the conference, I'm indebted to the hard work, involvement, and perseverance of my whole team, and I hope the deliberations hereof will be useful to all participants and stakeholders. We invited papers to stimulate academicians and students to reflect on this topic, and we have received 15 papers and 90 participants have registered for this webinar. Thank you all for the interest shown. Over to you, Amrita.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure there are a lot of takeaways that we all will be blessed with at the end of this webinar. I now request Vice Principal of Self-Finance Section, another visionary leadership, Dr. Mona Mehta, to introduce the chief guest for today's webinar. Over to you, Mona Madam.
Thank you, Amrita. A very good morning to Professor Dr. Moshmi Datta, in charge Vice Principal. Our chief guest for today, Professor Rekha Pandey, who I'm going to be introducing, and all the dignitaries who are present over here today. You know, they say girls with dreams become women with vision. And that is exactly what Professor Rekha Pandey stands for. It gives me great privilege to be introducing her because she has done so much for empowering women, not only in India, but also abroad. Let me just take you through glimpses of her life. Professor Rekha Pandey is a former professor of history and women's studies. She is the present director of SEED, that stands for Society for Empowerment Through Environmental Development. She was a former head of the Center for Women's Studies and head of Department of History at the University of Hyderabad. She was also the director of Women's Study at the Maulana Azad National Urdu University. She has been the founding member of 2 centers for women's studies, one at Maulana Azad National Urdu University and the other at the University of Hyderabad. She was the chair of the Women's World Congress in 2014, which was organized for the first time in India. She has, to her credit, 20 books and more than 150 articles in national and international journals. Her work in the interdisciplinary area of history and women's studies has been remarkable. She has been the editor of International Feminist Journal of Politics, that is IFJP, of Routledge Taylor and Francis Group in UK. She has also edited Foreign Policy Analyst, which is published by Blackwell, USA. She has received the Visiting Fellowship, Birkbeck Institute of Humanities, University of London, International Visiting Fellowship in the School of Policy Studies in the University of Bristol, UK, Academic Fellow, University of Buffalo, USA, and International Visiting Scholar at Maison de Research, Paris, and Visiting Professorship at the University of Artios, Arnas, France. Ma'am, these are indeed remarkable achievements that you have to your credit. She was invited as the erudite scholar for gender studies by the government of Kerala in 2016. She was also nominated as the Peace Ambassador for the South Asia region by the International Women's Peace Group, Korea, for the year 2016-2018. She has been the project director for 41 projects. She has guided 23 PhD students and 44 MPhil students in both history and gender studies. She has been an assessor for NAC and is involved in the accreditation and evaluation of a large number of colleges and universities across India. She has widely traveled in India and abroad to deliver keynote addresses and lectures and present papers in national and international conferences. Ma'am, in 2019, was invited by the National Commission of Women, Government of India, to be a resource person for the gender sensitization and gender development program in India. There could be no better person to set the ball rolling for our webinar today. Ma'am, it's indeed a privilege having you here. Women empowerment, or what we call as we all women have gathered over here to listen from a woman who is empowered, strategies which can help us make ourselves better and survive the post-COVID-19 era. Thank you, ma'am. It was a privilege having you amongst us, and I look forward to hearing you. Over to you, Amrita. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona ma'am. I'm struggling to find an adjective. It was extravagant to listen to your achievements, ma'am. So I now request our chief guest of today's program, Professor Rekha Pandey, to share her words of wisdom with us. Over to you, Rekha ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mona Mehta, for those wonderful words. And unfortunately, last moment we've shifted to Google. So, if I make my screen big, my experience has been it stops. So what I'll do, I'll be presenting with a small slides and I can send you my presentation later on. So it is indeed a privilege for me to be part of this. I can see so many students and others joining in. And I would really like to thank Moshami Datta, Amrita Sahasrabuddhi, Mona Mehta, Kavita Kalkoti, Vijay Kumar Suchak, Vaishali ji, Sapna ji, and Preeti Tripathi for inviting me here. And all of us are, now dealing with the online mode. And I think your topic is very relevant. In fact, yesterday only on Facebook, I posted a write up saying after 2 years, I stepped out of the house to give a face-to-face lecture. And it was so empowering, because nothing can replace a direct interaction. But unfortunately, because, we have no other alternative, we have to manage with this. Now, I'm going to speak on COVID and what impact it has had on education. But before that, I thought it would be important to first understand a little as to what this virus has done to all of us, not only the education system, everywhere. And all of us are aware that for the last 2 years, our world has really turned topsy-turvy. We have adopted new ways of, mingling with each other, dealing with each other, we've, associating with people. And this small virus, which was found in Wuhan, on 31st December 2019. And, first it was mentioned by the WHO country office. And all of us have seen how it spread from the Chinese province, creating havoc. We have seen the havoc in, European countries and other places. But now this SARS is known as COVID-2 and the disease is called COVID-19. It is recognized as an infectious disease which primarily affects the lung. And till today, we have seen 3 waves of this virus. The first wave was, somewhere from April to where we could see, and it crossed 15.9 million. The first wave saw more than 1,85,000 deaths. The second wave, all of us are familiar, it's too fresh in our memory now. It was even much more speedier than the first wave. And you had a lot of mutant viruses which came up, the incubation period was less. And now, we thought everything was fine, our economy was getting back on its legs, when suddenly, there was a new virus which we came across called Omicron. And now it has reached its peak in Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Haryana. And we are now, dealing with it. Every day, in fact, you hear of new viruses which are coming up. And the reason why it is widespreading, because we have not been able to follow the COVID appropriate behavior. The CABA has become a very important word in today's vocabulary, because a country like India, we are not using masks, we are not maintaining distances. And this is something which has really impacted a lot. All of us know what are the symptoms of these virus, leads to mild or high to moderate respiratory diseases, and especially older people and younger people are affected much more. Older people who have already health and morbidity conditions like cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, respiratory diseases, cancer, they are likely to suffer more. And we find that what it has done, this disease for the last few years, it has had a severe impact. Because when we look at any kind of such pandemic which has affected more than 4 billion people, it devastates societies, it devastates economy, and it brings about a change in behavior, attitude, and the whole paradigm shift is something which one can see in this disease. And what is very important for us is it has brought about a shift in gender equality. Because, what we have seen is already the world is a very unequal place, especially if you look at India. For the past 50 years, in 85 states, we've had no female heads. In terms of economic participation, the gender gap report tells us that it will take more than 257 years to close this gap. And again, this report tells us that 55% of the women globally are engaged in labor market as opposed to 78% men. And there are 72 countries where women are barred from even opening bank accounts today. They cannot obtain any kind of credit. And in no other country in the world do men spend that much time as women spend on unpaid work. So already the world was a very unequal space. And here, you have the pandemic which has come in, and it has really brought about a big gap. As you are all aware, there is something called the World Pandemic Report, and it brings about, it judges a society based on certain criteria: health, political index, education, and economic factors. And already India is much bottom. India stands 150 in the index. We are 94.4%. In terms of violence, we have a lot of violence. It talks about forced marriage, discrimination, etc. And it focuses a lot on education. In fact, I would request all of you to please go to the net. Every year's report is available. The World Economic Forum brings out these reports. They are easily available on the net. The World Gender Gap Report. We've had gender gap reports of 19, even 20 has been put up. And the report clearly points out that unless women are actively involved, for the well-being of the economic system, for the labor market will not benefit. It also talks a lot about health and economic crisis, which has come about as a result of COVID. And it says that we really need to, bring in more and more women. So, already this report is talking how there is a big gender gap coming off the pandemic. You've had a very severe gap. And the kind of data which we have, there is a lot of difference in terms of, how people who are exposed based on how these individuals are placed, based on their place of residence, income, race. These will definitely have a major factor. And then it also tells us that, men and women work in different ways. In our society, our roles are very different, because how our society constructs, the social construct of a society is such that women are much more responsible for managing things. And yet, there is no gender parity in the world. In fact, we have, there are countries like the Iceland, which has a lot of gender parity. It is the topmost country in gender parity. It is for the 11th consecutive year, it is remaining. You have countries like Albania, Ethiopia, Mali, Mexico, and Spain, which have again come up. They have improved a lot in the past few years. But then the gender gap report of 2020 points out that we will never see this gender parity in our lifetime, at least for our generation, because and it says that it will take us more than 99.5 years. None of us will live that much long to get this gender parity. And since, it is, it talks about saying that the main reason for this is, the way our social structure is, the way our economic structure is dealing with these issues. And now the pandemic has really created a lot of havoc. If you kind of look at it, the whole language of this pandemic is very, gendered. And when, the head of the state talks about the whole nation as being one family, we are not referring to a family where there is care, where there is a warmth in familial relationship by and large. But the whole reference is to a family which is very patriarchal in its approach. We give lots of examples from Ramayana and Mahabharata. People are talking about the Lakshman Rekha, stay at home, follow the Lakshman Rekha. But then, for a woman, the Lakshman Rekha is something, it is recognized as something that you cannot violate this domestic zone. You have to, and it is something very new for women. And right from 19th century, if you look back at our history, I will not have so much time to go into details, but the whole model in which we created this universal mode of a housewife, mother who's confined, who's responsible for taking care of the kids, managing the children, it shows a very patriarchal society. So, when our leaders say, stay home and stay safe, unfortunately, that's not true for many families, many women especially. But more than that, there has been so much of a loss of jobs. And more than 40% of the women earlier to the pandemic were working part-time, when compared to only 13% of the men who were working part-time. And in these kinds of relationship, when the children are at home, you have to take care of the family. It is generally men who become the bread earners. And especially now, when schools were closed, there was a lot of alienation, and the paid economies closed. You had none of these nurseries, babysitters who were there. The whole work of caring for children, managing the home, looking after, cooking, all this fell on the women. And therefore, it had a lot of impact on the women at this front. Definitely, there was a lot of increase in workload for women, because we have data from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. And it says that everywhere, including the Indian women, we do 6 hours of unpaid work. And it is, everywhere in the world, men spend less time than that. And it has calculated the unpaid work for which you get not paid anything. It is 76.2% across the globe. And when, you had the pandemic, you had more than 300 million children who missed out of school. They were all at home. And obviously, the workload of a women increased. And we find, Oxfam study points out that women and girls invest 3.26 billion per hour of unpaid work in India. In Indian economy, if we convert it into rupees, it would be 19 lakh crore rupees per year. In fact, the amount of money which women can earn and they don't get paid for this, it would be 20 times more than the entire educational budget of our country. So you can very well imagine how much women contribute, and yet we don't recognize. Even today, if you ask a person, you say, what does your mother do? Oh, she does nothing. And then you ask a man, what does your wife? Oh, she does nothing. And then very proudly you say, my wife is a teacher, my mother is a doctor, my mother is a lawyer. But if they are sitting at home and managing, we say, oh, she does nothing. And then you ask this person, who does your cooking? Oh, my mother does. Who does managing the house? Oh, my mother does. Who washes the clothes? My mother does. But yet we say she does nothing. Why? Because economists have told us work is something for which you get paid. So if I go out and I teach in a university or a college, I get a salary, that is work. But if I'm teaching my children at home, that is after all my duty. If I go and teach in someone else's, cook in someone else's house and I get a salary, that becomes work. But if I'm cooking in my own house, then that is after all my duty. And most of the women are in these unpaid works. Another major impact is the increase in domestic violence. There has suddenly, like I said, everyone is saying stay home and stay safe. Unfortunately, for many women, home isn't a place which is safe for many women. When, there is self-quarantine, many of the men have lost their jobs. Earlier, they were not getting their drink. The violence at home really increased to a large extent. And there have been lots of studies, the output of women in research is also something which has decreased over this period. There have been studies where they looked at what women were contributing to research prior to the pandemic and what they have contributed after the pandemic. It has also had a lot of impact on human rights because, with the disruption of critical healthcare, humanitarian and development programs also had a hit. And we find that most of the, about 50% of the maternal deaths occurred because of the complications in pregnancy and childbirth in countries which were already affected by frugality, and the health sector had a lot of impact because of the pandemic at this time. And especially, all of us have seen how the whole health sector, in spite of the various contribution made by our doctors and our nurses, it also, it showed its impact. It showed that we had to really improve these areas which was needed. It also had a lot of mental impact on older women. Recently I've just completed a study where we looked at 4 states, what impact Corona had on these women. And, we looked at 2 women above 60 in these 4 states, women who were staying at home and women who were staying in these institutions. And we could overall see that it had a lot of impact on these. All of us are familiar. We've seen so many scenes in television. There was so much of a migration of people which started. But now let me come to education. Am I audible?
Yes, madam.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
I don't
Yes,
know,
ma'am.
I'll be speaking
Yes, yes,
behind the
ma'am.
laptop. When I go off the screen, we really don't know in these.
No, ma'am. We are listening very carefully to you,
Okay.
whatever you're saying. Huh?
Fine. So, see, I am just showing you a recent picture of the world. This is how education has impacted. You can see the areas which are in red, magenta. Here you've had the maximum impact. India is also there. At second level, you have countries which are shown in yellow. But what is interesting about this picture is education has been impacted everywhere around the world. It is not just in India, but all over the world. And what we found is that, the UNESCO report points out that 157 crore students in 191 countries have been impacted a lot in terms of education, especially due to this corona. And in India, we have 32 crore students, especially, who are going to schools and colleges, which are shut, according to the UNESCO report. And this report points out that the severely impacted are students from 9th to 12th class. And you have 13 crore children who fall in this bracket. And, many of these students have to write board exams. They have to mark out their career. And there are, lot of issues which have come up at this time. And a large number of women are also expected to upgrade themselves. Now, what happened, as the UNESCO study points out, that you have 89% of girls who are out of school. See, it has impacted children both, but it has impacted girls much more than boys. Because suddenly what we found, a large number of girls were withdrawn from school. And it says that 1.54 billion children who are enrolled in schools and universities, out of this 743 million are girls. But then, 89% of these girls have been impacted by this pandemic. And out of these girls, 111 million girls live in the least developed countries. So you can very well imagine, if we look at the education scenario, you have the world scenario. So out of these, all children are affected. Schools are closed. But among them, more than the boys, it is the girls who are affected. And among the girls, most of these girls come from lesser developed regions who are affected. And what has happened is, especially among the adolescent girls, the dropout rate has really increased. It has led led to, as a result of all this, the report points out that it has exacerbated the gender gap in education, that it has led to a lot of sexual exploitation. Many of the girls are getting married early in many of these regions. It has led to a lot of, unintended pregnancies, and early marriage and, forced marriage is a very important phenomena which has happened at this place. Now, all of us know that for a girl, education is something which is very important, because the better the girl is educated, after all, who is a girl? She's a woman of tomorrow. And the better educated this girl is, the better educated the women will be there. She will be more informed about nutrition, healthcare. She will have fewer children. She will marry at a later age. She will focus on her career. And then, even the children born will be healthier. And if these children then, are becoming mothers later on, you'll have a much more better and educated product that comes out. So therefore, education is very central. Unfortunately, and it is true also, and it was needed also. In this pandemic, healthcare was the priority, because after all, if you're not able to save life, where is education going to come on? So the first importance was given to health. Second, we gave importance to economic aspects. And now we really need to focus on education, because after 2.5 years, education has taken a severe beating. See, a girl's education goes beyond just attending school. And it is, we have to ensure that these girls are safe within schools. They have an opportunity to compete at different levels. They acquire education and skills so that they can compete in labor market at a later stage. They gain certain social and emotional life skills so that they can navigate and adapt themselves to the changing world. They can make their decisions on their own. And we find with, this recent World Bank study shows that with now limited educational opportunities, earlier, girls would complete their education, school education, in 12 years. And it would cost countries between 15 trillion to 30 trillion in their earnings. But now, this has taken a severe beating at this time. And like I already pointed out, the UNESCO study says today 129 million girls, which includes 32 million primary education, 97 million secondary education girls, they are out of schools. They are not going to schools. And we find that the, globally primary, secondary enrollment rates are, they are getting closer. Before the pandemic, we had to fight a long battle because boys' education was at a much more higher level than girls' education. In many of my projects which I've done studies where I've looked at madrasas and all. Parents preferred to send boys to a public school, to a private school. But for girls, they preferred either a free school or a madrasa where the girl could be educated. So, we started with a very big gender gap. But just before the pandemic, we were coming close to it. 90% of the boys were being educated and 89% of the girls were being educated in these schools. But then what we find is this gap has again increased during the pandemic period, because most of the girls have been withdrawn from school, and majority of them, 67% of them, are from primary school. And another thing, like I pointed out, they are from low, income countries. And most of these girls are pressured into getting married because they do not have access to quality education. There are limited job opportunities. Many of them are getting married. Something happened during this period, during the last few years, was suddenly, we find that besides, learning behavior, social distancing became the norm. Classroom teaching became impossible. And as a result of this, on one hand, the students had to learn. how to cope up with this new method. The teachers also had to learn, because now, teachers were communicating to the students either through phone calls, voice messages. They had learned the internet, technology was adapted to a different way in which it could deal with it. And online teaching became the norm, because this was something which was easily conducted. Now, what impact did online teaching have? A few months back, I went to visit my mother, and she is in Uttarakhand, and we have a outhouse at the back, and the lady who works in a house, she had 2 children. So one day I just called them. I said, let me have a look at what you're learning and what are your books and all. And they just had one phone among 2 of them, and they had not even opened. In a government school, the teachers were doing a lot of efforts. They had made up lessons, they had put it on WhatsApp, and they were sending them, messages on WhatsApp. Many of these children did not have smartphone. And, imagine so many lessons, physics, chemistry, science, social science, English, maths, everything is on WhatsApp. The WhatsApp is filled, they don't even open them for some time. And what happened? A big gap arose between government schools and private schools. See, the private schools, children came from a very different background. They had money, they had resources, their parents were well versed with technology, they could provide them with phones, they could provide them with internet connection. But in poor households, what happened? First, all the government schools closed because they did not even know how to cope with it. For 1 year, most of them closed, at least in Hyderabad. I don't know about Maharashtra and other places. All these schools were closed. But then, how long could they continue? Finally, they opened these schools. The teachers devised their own methods. Like I was saying, through WhatsApp, they were sending them. But how many of these children had, smartphones or connection? How many of them had internet at home? How many of them could really have laptops and computers? It was a big question. So what happened as a result of this online teaching? A big gap arose between the haves and the have-not. People who have internet, people who do not have internet. So on the educational front also, we had a big crisis which emerged, and you had, 2 division. On one hand, the teachers were also unprepared for this online education. One, see, the very fact that all of us are now using Google, I'm sitting behind a laptop and talking to you. All of us learned this technology over time. We were not using it so often, but in private schools, many of the teachers were already using this. And most of the government school teachers and others had to learn. And that is true of many of the private schools also. Suddenly they had to learn a new way of communicating. And I discuss a lot with many of my, younger friends who have small children. And there is a generation of students now, students who are now in 2nd class and all, they have never seen a school. And it is all online teaching. And now, a few days back, there was a report in the local newspapers in Hyderabad that all these teachers went and met the chief minister, and they said that please open the school. They are putting a lot of pressure. And they reported, that when they are scolding the students, imagine a teacher scolding a student in an online method. They have become very smart and they unmute the teacher. And the teacher goes on saying, and they are busy. Some of my friends tell them their children have learned so well, they don't come in front of the camera and they are busy playing video games, and the teacher goes on speaking at the other end. So, children have also become very smart. So on one hand, while the teachers were unprepared, they learned how to get along in this online education. The children have also become smart and they know how to use it. And it has had a lot of impact. Then, when you look at every discipline, see, every discipline cannot be taught online. This has had a lot of impact, because some discipline you can teach, but some discipline reach a lot of different kind of teaching methodologies. And the biggest challenge which has come in front of our education is that it is primarily the marginalized who have got left in. And it is, because they come from families where they do not have, they lack stable internet connection. They have to share smartphones, if at all there is inadequate space for learning. See, when a class is going on, the student has to sit. If that whole family of 5-6 members is sharing one room, they cannot get that kind of peace in which. So while on one hand, the teachers are also struggling with the online format, dealing with a large number of challenges, the children are also dealing with these kinds of challenges which are happening. And by and large, what has happened in this pandemic period, that we have passive learning. More or less, students are only going in for passive learning. And it has, in some way, students are also finding it very difficult. In fact, this report pointed out, which I was talking about, the teachers of Hyderabad going and meeting the chief minister. They said, sir, students are losing their interest in education. And so we need to really open school. And one lady in that report, it was pointed out, that she said that I got angry with my daughter who was not paying attention to her online class. And I told her, do you want to grow up and become a housemaid? And she says, yes, I prefer becoming a housemaid than studying. So, the teacher says that these are the kinds of issues that we are dealing with. And there is a lot of learning, passive learning, which is taking place. Many of the universities and colleges went into blended learning, where, they tried their best to have some odd kind of learning. And, earlier also we had MOOC and these kinds of, technology with which we were doing blended learning. Yes, one of the biggest advantage of online learning is, it's not that it is all bad. If we deal with these infrastructural issues, if we deal with our organizational issues, there are a lot of advantages. So I think the first priority which we have to set up in front of our country is, we have to really connect our country, the remote areas, the remote villages, the remote school. Everyone should be connected with internet, which is, that should become a priority when we are talking in terms of education. Because one of the biggest advantage of an online education is that it can become really international. The very fact that I'm sitting in Hyderabad speaking to you in Bombay, and these are the advantages. Person sitting in New York can address students, so the kind of connectivity, the advantage which can bring in, and it can really add to our education system. We can make a lot of changes in our curriculum, in our syllabi, in our programs in school education across the country, if we have these kinds of advantages with international collaboration. Skill development will also become very important, because see, each and every teacher has a certain skill, and once this kind of training is there, they can upgrade themselves. And the teachers will also now slowly evolve into a technology centered teaching. Whether we like it or not, this is something which we cannot avoid, and we have to learn technology centered leading. We have to ourselves become competent individual, so that we can deliver to the student what they expect. And whether we are talking as a faculties, one, a faculty plays two kinds of role as a teacher. One, you contribute to the students, and you also contribute to your own growth. And the faculty themselves will grow if they have a lot of collaborations, if they interact, if they are able to listen to a lot of people in that. And definitely, India, it is a big opportunity for India, especially rural India. Having said that, first we need connectivity. If we are able to digitally connect every village and town in India, we will have better interaction between students and teachers. And we can have, why can't all our schools, even the public schools, become like our private schools? The private schools have, a fees which runs into lakhs. And we have, the government schools to which we have really not paid that much importance, and we can really bridge this gap with technology. The only way we can do it is through technology. Otherwise, we will really have these two distinctions which is there will remain. The pedagogy of this digital education is, it plays a very important role, because we can deal with digital content, our course content, we can deal with educationists, the course taker, and technology. All these four wings can be brought together in a digital education. Plus, democratization of technology will also have a lot of impact, and if we can make our online education affordable, make the telecom infrastructure, internet connectivity available, it has much more advantages than disadvantages. And definitely, why is it that each and every student in our country, each and every girl in our country cannot dream of having a top job, working abroad, which only private school or education students can deal with? The state is also playing a major role, because the state, whether it is Haryana, Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Jharkhand, all of them are working towards changing of the school. The school transformation is already happening in many directions. Many of the schools, you have WhatsApp group, you have Karpe school model, which have come up. They have, devised their own methods. In many of the villages, they have put up a sound system where students can sit and listen to lessons being said. In many of the schools, the teachers have arranged weekly phone interaction between students and teachers. In many other villages, they have devised use radio and television to deliver. So a lot of initiatives are also happening. The Association of Indian Universities is also playing a major role. It is trying to, through the university system, it is also trying to deal with education among the grown-up students. Higher education is also, not only school education, but higher education is also going through a lot of challenges because of the pandemic. There is a lot of impact which is happening. But one of the major concerns for many of these schools is, how do you deal with attendance? Because how do you, unless the student is present, unless they are attending, it is very difficult to pass on any teaching. Because in a school, the students are not so educated. They don't understand the value of education. So attendance is a must. But how do you deal with this? For this also, they have taken up a lot of, initiatives have been taken up. NCRT is working in this direction. The MCHRD, the Department of Technical Education. You have a lot of, for the college educations, they have started EPG Pathshala, SWAYAM courses. You have Vidwan, a lot of YouTube channels, and this is something which we really now need to translate into schools. You need to establish knowledge networks. You need to have technology enhancement learning. We need a national mission on education which can go. So if I look at the future, definitely we find that today we have reached a state where the physical infrastructure will have less impact on the quality of education. It is the quality, which we are able to deliver to the students, which will have a lot of impact. Now we need to learn how to have parents, teachers meetings, subject conferences, logistics, all these through the online method. And the advantage, maybe in future our schools will develop in such a way that, we can get the benefit of different schools coming together. Teachers also benefiting from that kind of an education. One of the greatest challenges for our future is, how do we change the mindset of our policymakers, authorities, educationists, and even students? We have to now slowly move into a new frame of mind. When we select faculty, we have to now base our faculty selection on how technology friendly they are and how keen they are to adopt to technology. This is a big challenge in front of us. We never paid attention to this. This is something which has to be done. We also have to, how do we accredit an institution? What are the criteria that are needed? How do we upgrade the school or college? This is another challenge which we have to face. And third is, definitely this is linked to our country, that we have to strengthen the infrastructure in the long way, and only then we will be able to do it. Even student selection format will now have to change, because we have to see, that we have to first start with training the students with technology. Once you admit the students, they have to learn. They have to, the whole learning management system has to take up new norms, and it has to go, e-learning has to go at a very fast pace than compared to the earlier period. And what is very much required in this scenario is we need to put more and more material in the digital format, be it schools, be it colleges. This is something which is required. The universities, the higher education have really started. When I look back in the past 2-3 years, a lot of material has come in the form of e-content. Unfortunately, that has not happened in colleges and school. So this is something which is really required. And we need a lot of collaborative work to go on. See, earlier, all our schools, our institution, be it a school, be it a college, be it a university, we were all working in our own ivory towers. We were all living in isolation. But now is the time for more collaboration. We need to really work in collaboration. So I would just like to conclude whatever I have said up, that one, in our world, there was a lot of gender inequality which was existing. And a pandemic really strengthened this, and it created much more impact. Though, in the pandemic, the priority was health and infrastructures and hospitals, which got a priority. Second priority was economics. And third was education. So this was something which continued. But now, having dealt with the pandemic for more than 2.5 years, we now need to focus on education. Like I already pointed out, education has taken a severe beating. It has affected in the world, girls much more than boys, and girls much more in developing countries. And there has been a lot of, they have been forced into marriage. Trafficking has increased, violence has increased, and many of these girls have been withdrawn from school. And therefore, it is very important that now we pay more attention to school and college education. Higher education has also taken up, especially for girls' education. We need to really, talk in terms of include more and more women into the heart of the whole COVID-19 response. And, we have to first transform the economies at home, the unpaid care, into more new and inclusive care economy. We have to design socio-economic plans which will focus more on women and girls. We have to put women and girls at the center of whatever change we are taking place. UNICEF gives a 5-point program, which we really have to follow. It says we have to give care for the caregivers. We have to prepare for an increased gender-based violence, focus on this issue. And we also have to maintain health care. Obviously, that is there. But then we also have to focus on our education system. We have to engage more and more women and girls into this. And only now, it is high time. We have dealt with this pandemic for a long time. We cannot continue to excuse ourselves saying, oh, it's the pandemic, it's the pandemic. Now we have to learn how to deal with it. And in this, I strongly believe that, education should be our priority. And on top of that, girls' education should be a priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rekha ma'am. It was really thought-provoking. You made the challenges and strategies to deal with them so crystal clear. I now request the co-convener of today's webinar, Dr. Preeti Tripathi, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Preeti madam.
Thank you, Amrita. Good afternoon, everyone. I, Dr. Preeti Tripathi, consider it a privilege to be proposing the vote of thanks for the inaugural session of this webinar on reinventing sustainable women empowerment strategies in post-COVID-19 scenario. मेरे होने से ही ये कायनात जवान, जिंदगी की बेहद हंसी हकीकत हूँ, हर रूप रंग में ढलकर संवर जाऊं, सब्र की मिसाल हर रिश्ते की ताकत हूँ, अपने हौसले से तकदीर को बदल दूं, सुन ले ए दुनिया, हाँ मैं औरत हूँ. Each time a woman stands up for herself, she stands up for all other women. The central theme of the webinar was to show the way for a woman to stand up for herself, for being strong, for being solid, for believing in herself, for knowing herself, for trusting her actions, for forging ahead with right intentions, and for making it a habit to succeed. Teaching is an art which must assist the art of discovery. Our resource person, Professor Rekha Pandey, a researcher par excellence, showed us how difficult concepts can be put simply and researched extensively. Thank you, ma'am, for addressing the gathering on COVID and its impact on education of girls. An interesting point you made, ma'am, that women contributes 19 lakh crore per year of productive activities and not included in economic indicators. Major impact of COVID was on education. In this too, girls were impacted. 89% of girls, according to UNESCO, has been affected and coming from lesser developed nations. Exploiting marriage, early marriages during this period is a matter of concern. Thank you, ma'am, to address us. Your expert redemption will stay with the participants for a long time. A big thank you to the management of our college, which is always open to new ideas and promotes academic ventures initiated by us. A radar is used to help navigate ships and airplanes, showing the way forward. In our director, Dr. Mrs. N.C. Jose, we have such a radar who navigates smoothly the multiple sections of our college. Thank you, ma'am, for always encouraging us. Our in-charge principal, Professor Dr. Moshmi Madam, is an avid researcher and is full of zeal and energy in whatever she does. She infuses confidence in us to move forward. When we thought of this webinar, she believed in us and asked us to go ahead. These few moments when we were planning for the webinar, we found ourselves many times at difficult crossroads and at a loss. That was when we approached her for solutions, which she readily gave us. Thank you, Moshmi ma'am, for supporting us whenever we needed it. Mr. V.G. Suchak, our vice principal, is an enthusiastic and passionate teacher who helps us in any activity that we undertake. Thank you so much, sir. Our vice principal of self-finance section, Dr. Mona Mehta, is a soft-spoken, strong individual who knows exactly how to guide us in the right direction. Thank you, Mona ma'am, for giving us the boosting whenever we require. Thank you. I also thank Dr. Kavita Kalkoti, convener of the seminar, for taking the initiative and organizing the webinar with such an interesting topic. Teamwork divides the work and multiple success. The webinar team are also members of Women's Study Center and Women Development Cell, and they proved that this is true. They all came together and stayed together to host and achieve this webinar. Thank you, Ms. Neeta Dhote ma'am, Dr. Vaishali Godeshwar, Ms. Amruta Shastrabudde, Dr. Vivek Chaube, Ms. Kavita Rana, Dr. Swapna Joshi, and Ms. Sonali Watkar for always walking hand in hand, being aware and mindful that what we are doing will make a difference. Your commitment has made a difference. In these tough times, we have realized that only tough teams survive. Our dear student volunteers, who are the backbone of our college, made this tough time pass easily with their readiness to volunteer and complete tasks in a timely manner. Deepali Wagoshi, Jemima Jose, Pooja Shah, Jash, and Dev, all of you deserve special thanks for your effort. No idea will reach its goal without active participants. I extend my warm thanks to all the participants for attending the webinar in large numbers and motivating us to further take up more conferences in future. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Amrita.
Thank you, Preeti ma'am. We are moving to the first technical session of the webinar. The speaker for the first session, she is joining us in some time. Meanwhile, I would like to give a gentle reminder for all the participants to fill the feedback form at the end of every session, which will be posted in the chat box. Even for the inaugural session, the feedback form has been posted in the chat box. So I request all the participants to fill the feedback form. I now hand over to Ms. Kavita Rana to carry forward with the session. We will start with the next session in a while. Over to you, Kavita ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita ma'am. A very good morning, respected Director Madam, Dr. Mrs. Nancy Jose.
Kavita ma'am,
Yeah,
the resource person for this session
yes.
will be joining at 11:30. She messaged me.
Okay.
So we will give a short break
Okay.
and we can join. You will be here.
Okay.
So 11:30, as soon as she joins, we will start.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am?
Yeah. Madam is the first transgender person in India to be appointed as a judge to the Lok Adalat in Guwahati. Swati Madam filed one of the first cases in India seeking permission from the court to undergo sex reassignment surgery. Madam also filed a PIL at Guwahati High Court challenging the Ayushman Bharat for accommodating transgenders under the said scheme. Madam is responsible for the inclusion of trans community in Atal Amrit Yojana and benefited 500 transgender person as beneficiary under the said scheme. Madam was the first to establish a separate shelter home for homeless transgender in the state of Assam known as Tritiyo Nivas. Madam was India's first trans person to be appointed as legal panel counsel of Airports Authority of India. Madam is awarded with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Samman Padak 2020 from Babu Jagjeevan Ram Kala Sanskriti and Sahitya Academy, New Delhi. She is also awarded with Prerna Award 2020 from His Excellency Governor Shri Jagdish Mukhi and renowned veteran actor Srimati Sharmila Tagore. The list of Madam's work for the community and achievements goes on and on. Madam, we are all eager to hear you. So without wasting any more time, I would request Swati Barua Madam to take over. Over to you, Madam.
Very good. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, you are.
Yes, ma'am.
So a very good morning to all of you, and I hope you guys are not bored that I kept you waiting for so long. So let's start the topic about the gender inequalities that happened during in the early ages, and even after the colonial rule, it got converted into a mass problematic situation that still today we are facing it. Because despite the high status of women during the Vedic period, gender bias was entrenched deeply in the cultural heritage of not only India but in other societies also. Even Manu, the Hindu lawgiver, had stated wherever women are seen, God chooses it as his abode. So the scriptures also idealizes the place of woman in Indian societies as Devi or Shakti. According to Atharva Veda, the birth of a girl grants elsewhere, here grant a boy. This discrimination is found not only in India but also among other societies. An admiring husband in Lady Macbeth says, "Bring forth male children only, for they undaunted mated should compose nothing but males." In Japan, you will be you will be astonished to know that they celebrate boys' days rather than any girl day or female day. So in Japan, the boys' day is celebrated by declaring a holiday but there is no such holiday as Girls' Day. So this is very problematic. Similarly, Chinese women prefer to die rather stop bearing children. If the first baby was a girl, even in modern Western societies, which are democratic and progressive in nature, there are more chances of divorce where there are female children. So India is an ancient country of prehistoric culture, and its roots can be traced back to ancient Hindu civilization. India in the land of mysticism, spiritualism, myths, and legends within a closed society, which has been in existence for the past 6,000 years. Moduled into historical, political, cultural, and religious. So Indian culture has got its trace long back than thousands of years during the beginning of Vedic period or the period of Rig Veda. But it is evident from all available accounts that Vedic society was a patriarchal one, and hence father was the head of the family, not the mother. But women occupied the same position as man. Reference to complete gender equality is found in all parts of the Vedic literature. Women reached high standards of learning and culture and made all-round progress. So the high esteem in which the wife was held during the Vedic age is evident from the fact that she was considered the better half that completed the husband. A man could not perform social or religious duties without his wife. But somehow in this today's modern era, that subject is somewhere gone missing. And for that, somehow I won't blame the entire male, but somewhat our female is also responsible. Because sometimes what we also see in most of our female persons, whenever they conceive or whenever they get pregnant, they also sometimes they don't want girl child. So they also prefers to have a boy. So that is very problematic in some situations. So therefore, if you matches the present scenario, what you will be able to find is the present ratio of male in comparison to female. The female ratio is very low. Suppose for an example, if there is 1,000 boy, 1,000 male, and comparison to that 1,000 male, you have only 600 female, then other 400 boys will where go? So this is the ratio that also we have to maintain. A woman had absolute control over their parinaya. Parinaya, you understand? Parinaya means gifts and property received at the time of marriage, or which is also most popularly known as Stridhan. And it was considered a sin, ek shrap, a curse, if relatives took away Stridhana, property exclusively belongs to the wife during the Vedic periods. In addition to an important position in the family, the woman actively participated in various social activities. The ancient scriptures in which women are found with their husband in a number of religious functions, confirming and doing all the duties that are required to be done. The woman also took active part in various other chants, hymns. If the husband had gone on a journey, the wife was required to perform the sacrifices. Further, there was an special sacrifices like Sita Yagna, Rudrabali, Rudra Yaga, which were exclusively performed by women during those Vedic periods. Now, post-Vedic periods, present where we are. What we see is in the post-Vedic period, or which is known as Manu Samhita or Smritis, that epics Ramayana and Mahabharata and Puranic period, that 300 or 500 BC, the status of women has actually declined. It was during this period that Arthashastra and Manusmriti were written. Women were denied the right to individual freedom, consigning the woman to the protection of father during childhood, husband during youth, and son during old age. As stated earlier, formative structures and traditional Indian society can be seen from the Arthashastra and Manusmriti, covering 400 and 500 BCs. Manusmriti, an authoritative compendium of laws, was written by the lawmaker Manu. It forms the beginning of the set of all law books which have come down to posterity under the spatial designations of Samhita. It stands midway between the old books and the new, forming a connecting link between the ancient and the modern legislators. As a code of law, it has for centuries held that supreme over India and the Hindu population. So during the post-Vedic period, there was 8 forms of marriage. Today we have only one form of marriage, which is presently available. But do you know, immediately after the post-Vedic period, there used to be a 7 kind or 8 kind of marriages. And what are that? Brahma marriage, Deva marriage, Arsha marriage, Prajapati marriage, Asura marriage, then Gandharva marriage, Rakshasa marriage, and Pechashchare marriage. So these are all 7-8 kind of marriages. In Manusmriti, what happened is, how you have to understand that how because after all, these are interlinked with the education and with the learning process. So after the post-Vedic period, how it came to be declined is, in Manusmriti, it says Manu gives the most important and popular code of conduct for women. And what were those? He prescribed the code of woman for all stages of her life. The laws of Manu state as follows. And what were that laws which was been stated by the Manu? No woman deserves freedoms. And this is a kind of, that I don't know what kind of ideology he took and which he didn't think of that ultimately this will have a very repercussion effect in the upcoming future, where Manu stated that a girl, a woman, or even an old woman should not do anything independently, even in her own house. In childhood, a woman should be under her father's control. In youth, under her husband, and when her husband is dead, under her son. Then a virtuous wife should never do anything displeasing to the husband who took her in marriage when he is alive or dead, if she longs for her husband world after death. Then by violating her duties towards her husband, a wife is disgraced in this world, and after death, in other world, she will never enter the womb of a jackal and be tormented by diseases or punishment for sins. These are absolutely nonsense without the application of mind, and people term him to be a sage. Then Manu also goes on to describing notes for the woman, like woman should control her own thoughts, words, and deeds, never slights her lord, resides after that with her husband in heaven, is called a virtuous wife. Now, these are all problematic, situations and things which came after the post-Vedic period. Now what happened is, attitude towards a woman during medieval period. We got some idea about the pre-Vedic and post-Vedic periods. Now in the medieval period, what inequalities towards gender, while in the rights of dignity, in the rights of education, learning, or having each and every rights, what happened during the medieval period? So in the last Aryan period after 500 BC, domination by the Brahmins, the priestly class, the growth of the caste system, and the other factors brought forth a sea change in the society. The rigidity of the caste systems and consequent restrictions of freedom were found during this period. The historical impact of invasion by Arabs, Afghans, Pathans, Turk, Mughal deteriorated the position of Indian women and made it much more worse during the medieval period. During this period, female infanticides, female marriages become very common, which is now also can be found, the female killing of female fratricides and all. Parda system that that are still as per the Shariat laws of Quran, and as per some of the rules that the Hadith, that still women are kept beyond the Parda Naseem. So Parda system became a practice as a result of a Muslim rule. This practice was unknown in the previous period of history where women could move out freely. With the arrival of the Muslims and the Mughals, they were compelled to live in seclusion in their homes. Whenever they had to go out, they went either in palanquin covered and with curtains, or most popularly known as burqas, or used parda. So during this period, two schools of law emerged. What were those schools? One came to be known as Mitakshara, another came to be known as Dayabhaga. The exponent of these schools being Vigneshwara and Jimutabahana. Both these schools of law considered Stridhan as a property given to the girl at the time of marriage. Mitakshara and Dayabhaga school gave right to the woman to give, sell, or use independently her property without the consent of her husband. These two schools also say that the husband has no right over the Stridhan. So some progressive after the development of new schools, that Mitakshara and Dayabhaga, some of the rights which was there during the pre-Vedic period, that again simultaneously came into existence. Thus, a definite pattern of inheritance of property emerged during this medieval period, which to some extent benefited the woman. Even after the invention of the Mughals, the Hindu society remained rigid and continued its old pattern of life on the principle and directives of money. Then after that, the role of present, the role of woman in the present India, everyone knows what is there. Then how this social discrimination comes. Being taken birth as a girl or as a female, what happened is, born into indifference and reared on neglect, the girl child is caught in a wave of cultural practices and prejudices that hamper her development both physically and mentally. In this country, the path from infancy to adolescence is quite difficult for a girl, especially during when you are surrounded by a patriarchal and gender stereotype mindset. So in this male dominated society, a girl child is considered as a burden on the family who will never contribute to the family income, and who at the time of marriage will take a major portion of family assets as a dowry. So this mindset to an extent has been changed, because some of our female members, some of the great personalities came out who brought gold, silver, bronze medals for the country, you know so in the Olympics, and also in many other sectors. Today women are there as a flight lieutenant in the Indian Air Force. Today in the junior commissioned officers are there. Even in many fields, even in law sector, even in medical sector, many women are there. Some of the women are also here in this meeting, who are associated with the university colleges, those who are also professors, and those who are also qualified PhD scholars. So we have reached to an extent. This took more than 30-40 years. This fight, the fight for feminism, it took a very long turn to achieve this present goal where we are standing. So discrimination against girl actually starts in the womb. If someone is saying कि नहीं मैं तो लड़की पैदा हुई मेरे साथ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन हुआ, नहीं. डिस्क्रिमिनेशन एक लड़की के साथ तब से चालू होता है कि जब वो माँ के गर्भ में रहती है. Many parents are also in a verge to abort their female fetuses, because society places a high emphasis on giving birth to male children. Many women had commented that by not giving birth to male children, their families will lose the chance to gain any type of social importance. Other reasons that female fetuses are aborted include the fact that parents feel that a girl would not be able to support the family. It is also because of the heavy dowry parents are expected to pay when their female children are married. So therefore, in many countries, not only in India, but also in the many other countries, girls are often expected to do the workload of adults. They often work long days, sometimes 18 hours, working in the field, factories, marketplaces, or as maids. Due to these long hours of sometimes what happens, the females or girls or women are often unable to have time for relaxation, to go to his home and to have some relax or recreation, So therefore, female are always denied their rights to education because they spend a majority of their time in working. Many families cannot afford to send all of their children to school also. You can see even in the, if you go by the Shahid Bhagat Singh Road from the Regal Circle to the Kulaba one, you at that point, you will see many of the, many of the women or small girls, they comes with the flowers in hand. Madam, ye kharid lo na, babu thoda paisa de do, like that. So why this is there? There is a continuing belief that there is no benefiting educating a girl child. When she could not be working or earning money for the family. So therefore, education is becomes much more pertinent when such kind of issue arises, and how to deal and tackle those issues. Therefore, the equality should be there. Otherwise, if you see how females were neglected, if someone of you who is present here she is well versed with the law, you will be astonished to know that even in the IPC, Indian Penal Code and Criminal Code procedures, not only male but females are also addressed as he, not she. This is very problematic. you know. So therefore, this kind of attitude and negligent attitude has to be removed from the patriarchal notions, because you know, other aspect of this conversation is that educating girls, what the patriarchal notions does actually thinks about, and that is educating girls is also seen as not worthwhile because it is believed that she will not need to be educated in the role the society has stated for her. That is the mentality कि बाप पैसा खर्च करेगा लड़की के ऊपर लेकिन लड़की कमा कर देगी ससुराल वालों को. So this mentality is required to be changed. Because in many societies, girls are expected to get married, stay at home, and raise children, and not work in a trade or professions. Thus, it is believed that educating boys is more important than girls because they are considered to have more future responsibility for the family's economic survival. पर इनको मालूम ही नहीं कि लड़का जब बड़ा हो जाए और अपने मर्जी से चलने लगे तो वही पहला इंसान होता है जो माँ बाप को घर से लात मार के निकालता है. So this notions has to be changed because inequalities. Otherwise, what happened is whatever you do, whatever the government comes in power, whether in center or in state, all those campaigns like, you know, Parega India to Barega India, then a happy girl is the future of our country, you know, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. This will go into vague if it is not changed in here. Because more than the physical appearance, the gender equality lies here, not in physical body. And therefore, you know, which is around, you know, at the age of 16 to 14, whom 60% are girls now. The government of India also announced many of the national action plans, how to tackle all those and to prevent female foeticide, infecticide, eliminate gender discrimination, provide safe drinking water and food near homes, you know, rehabilitate, protect girls from exploitations and assault and abuse. So these are many things. Also, many NGOs are also coming in that sector. That is a separate aspect of this. But even though we have to come forward, it should not be like कि चलो मतलब कुछ भी एक सब्जेक्ट के ऊपर टॉपिक के ऊपर डिस्कशन कर लिया and then we then wash out your hand from the responsibility. It should not be like that. जितना हो सके, अगर आप 100 रुपए कमा रहे हैं तो 2 रुपए तो आप दे ही सकते हो. और उस 2 रुपए से अगर मान के चलो कि अगर सारी फीमेल्स, those who are into the sector of many you know, educations in the many workplaces, अगर सब पूरे भारतवर्ष में जो बाकी दूसरे जो गर्ल चाइल्ड है, अगर हर कोई भी अगर 5 रुपए डोनेट करने लग जाए उनके बेटरमेंट के लिए, तो हमें किसी गवर्नमेंट के सामने जाके हाथ फैलाने की जरूरत ही नहीं. The woman will be self-empowered and self-dependent, and that we can only make rather than questioning each other. So that is why, you know, despite the clear theistic prohibition against child mother or girl child, you know, by major Western religions, female infanticides has been for centuries a prominent and socially acceptable event in two related areas of the world, most of all India and China. Even today, the extent of the problem is measured in frightening proportions. At least 60 million females in Asia are missing and feared dead. You know, because victims of nothing more than their sex worldwide reach suggests the numbers of missing females may top 100 millions every day. Even in this today's area, not only some of our female, those who are below poverty lines, who cannot afford educations and everything, they goes on to, road or public places for beggings or some for extra other works. Even we should somewhere feel shame on us that we have created such an environment and forced that and forced some of our below poverty line childs, and female persons, that they have went on to doing sex work. There are, we have forced someone, because in the village areas, what you will see is, if a father is financially weak and cannot afford, what they used to do is they used to sell their female childs. And after that, that child is been seen involved in human trafficking and everywhere. So these are very problematic situations, and that can only be settled down once we start, making differentiating about the patriarchal notion. If we throw the patriarchal notion and gender stereotype, then only we can prosperly, we can, go ahead by protecting all those rights that are meant for genders. Because genders, when we talk about genders, it is not only limited to, that female or male. It also extends its branches to transgender as well. What transgender peoples, what they see is, it is more pathetic, because gender equality is the process of being fair to men, women and transgender, but you won't find that. लोगों को लगता है सिर्फ कि ये चलो सड़कों पे या पब्लिक प्लेसेस में they used to go and clap, to give some consideration in exchange of blessings and all. But no, to ensure fairness, measures must often be put into place to compensate that what social and historical advantages that prevent genders from operating on a level playing field. And therefore, equity is a means for achieving gender equality. Because if we see the other aspect, what you will find is there are lots of things which you can't even expect. The patriarchal notion, how does it goes, and how that run away by the various definitions that are more pathetic in nature. Because what you see is the Jadalana. What does the Jadalana says, what the patriarchal notion of gender is, that male and females are like straight jacket. Gender is like a straight jacket where man and woman dances their unequal dances. However, that notion and that thought got, set aside by many of the jurists in the latter days. But however, such kind of feminist, patriarchal notions is required to be thrown in the dustbin and nothing else. Because the radical questioning started getting center space only in the 1960s, the era of student movement and the age of flower power, where the Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan are some of the major contributors to that era, which saw the growth of feminism as an academic discipline that traversed across varied disciplines such as philosophy, then psychoanalysis, linguistics, Marxism, then semiotics, semiology, media studies, and others. And what happened is, as a result, there are a number of brilliant works, one of which was Jane Austen, Public Man, Private Woman, that looks at the public and the private spheres from Plato to Marx. The feminist consciousness helps us realize how women and men are constituted. because what in during recently during the movement of that uh, removal of section 377 in the Supreme Court, when the fight was going on, what was the observation of the Supreme Court? It was that the Supreme Court took it in a very largely about the constitutional remedies and how we have been protected by that constitution. The Supreme Court goes on to say that the constitutional morality requires in a democracy the assurance of certain minimum rights, which are essential for free existence to every member of society. The preamble to the Constitution recognizes these rights as liberty of thoughts, expression, belief, faith, and worship, and equality of status and of opportunity. While constitutional morality is the guarantee which speaks that all inequalities is eliminated from the social structure and each individual is assured of the means for the enforcement of the rights guaranteed. And therefore, constitutional morality, not the collective morality. Constitutional morality learns towards making Indian heterogeneous population belonging to different classes, races, which cannot, however, be nurtured unless as recognized by the dignity of each individual, rights and dignity is protected. In his famous yet undelivered speech titled Annihilation of Caste, which has later published as a book by Dr. Ambedkar, what does it say? Dr. Ambedkar described fraternity as primarily a mode of associated living of conjoint communicated experience and essentially an attitude of respect and reverence towards fellow man. And therefore he remarked that an ideal society should be mobile, should be full of channels for conveying a change taking place in one part to other parts. In an ideal society, there should be many interests consciously communicated and shared. There should be varied and free points of contacts with other modes of associations. In other words, there must be social endosmosis. This is fraternity, which is only another name of democracy. The flourishing of a constitutional order requires not only the institutional leadership of constitutional courts, but also the responsive participations of the citizenry. While emphasizing how the inefficiencies in the working of any institution in the justice system adversely affect the working of other institutions and eventually hinder access to and the delivery of justice itself, the report provides us a comparison of how extensively such problems are in various states across the length and breadth of our country. It maps the change in the functioning of the state machineries across times and highlights a critical roadblock in effectively understanding its working. Furthermore, the stereotyped top-down approach in public institutions towards the gender inequalities in education and also in the other field has really suffered banality and has foreclosed any fresh outlook at the problems plaguing the justice system. Any light from the outside the system is not only unwelcomed, but is also generally seen as an intrusion to the functioning of the state machinery. What is critical is an open-minded exposure to scientific approaches. All this has been said often, but with a few paying heeds to the augmented problems person who holds sway over critical issues inhibiting access to and deliver of justice must have the good sense to pay attention before it is too late. And therefore, it would be more important to see how the scholars, experts, professors, lawmakers, judicial experts tackle these loopholes and lacunas, to tackle all the discussed discrimination towards the girl child, and how they tackle with the other defaulters, those who are continuously trying their level best by by pulling down the rights, dignity, and prestige that has been guaranteed by the Constitution to each and every gender by virtue of Article 14, which stands for equality, and also by virtue of Article 21 of the Constitution, which says and which protects us and gives us right to life with dignity. So with that note, I end up my speech over here, and I leave the dice open for all of your questions and queries. Thank you.
Dear participants, if you have any questions, please post your questions in the chat box.
Yes. Good afternoon to Swati ma'am and to Rekha ma'am, both of you.
Thank you.
So we meet again. Yes.
Can I ask, Devika?
She's not Devika, Rekha ma'am.
Yeah.
She's Swati. She's logged in by a different name. And I too would like to ask a question.
Okay.
I too would like to ask a question after this. Please, ma'am.
Okay. I was very happy to listen to a young scholar, but I really, see, our university was the first university in the country to set up a transgender committee. I didn't know this. I was informed by a student who was doing research on this, and I was the first chairperson who was part of it. In my 3 years of working, my biggest problem was how to change the mindset. I think all the other issues are secondary. How do you deal with this? And what do you propose? How can we go about it? Because for so many years, whether it is our literature, our religion, everyone has spoken in a different way. And this is something, I think, the biggest roadblock. So how do you deal with this? How do you go about talking about the mindset and changing it? What are needed in this?
Okay. So, see, in this, that Rome was not built in a day. It will take time. But however, we have to keep trying that how this gender stereotype mindset can be tackled down. And and how we can do that by bringing all spheres of gender into a single umbrella, and where are more participations of the members and trans members or other genders into one single place and tackle all those issues. So once the participation continues and proper sensitizations are done, so this inequalities to an extent will come down. Because otherwise what it happen is, we keep on talking about we will do this, we will do that. We will create a space, we will create reservations for each and everyone. But however, when it comes for a sensitization, which is a continuous process, which somewhere stops by doing 1 or 2 sessions. Because see, why it is a continuous process even for a university is, today suppose a student is admitted to a university or a college for some specific course for a period of such as like 2 years or 3 years, and after that he or she will be passing out and she will leave your college or university. So after that, a new students will come up, and he may have a stereotype mindset or a patriarchal mindset. So in that way, to tackle all those patriarchal notions, this process is a continuous process, and it has to be continued in each and every sessions. So that, and also we, by making or creating a sensitization continuously, also we have to keep our mind that the space which is available, whether in a college or in a university, it should be a gender friendly space. It is not like okay, this university is only particularly for a male person or for a female person. It should not like that. It should be a gender friendly environment where each and everyone, whether a male, female, or a trans, they can go anywhere, they can do anything, irrespective of an educational courses, which is friendly environment should be there. And I believe that that will only have a very powerful relationship with the scholars, professors, principals, head of the institution, HODs, which cannot be earned paid, and they appeared. Otherwise, what happened is they appeared less importance than the paid work by the other workforce, and therefore their value in an institution somehow dropped drastically. So in that case, you will find that if we see some of the institution which goes on to reporting, but otherwise these are some of the issues which goes away without unreported. Because if you go and if you see, keep on searching on the Google, you will find there are also some instances that some of the students, whether it was a trans students or whether it was a female students, they were subjected to radicalism, then nepotism by some of the student union, and some of the transgenders were not allowed to go inside the university and colleges to complete their higher education. So in such a thing, so I'm glad to know that your university was the first to take initiative on the trans. At the same time, I will also be happy that if your university makes this sensitization program continuous in nature, and at the same time creating a gender friendly environment, so that each and everyone can go easily, can have a friendly space, and can they share their thinking ideologies, to achieve that goal for what the universities and colleges are meant for.
Thank you, Swati. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So thank you, Rekha ma'am. You brought in a very pertinent question. My question is a little different. We have girls' colleges and we have co-ed colleges. Now, if a transgender, like you are a pioneer in this field because you have transcended all boundaries and you have achieved the highest. But not everyone is as lucky or as privileged as you. You come from a family where you had the family support, but usually we find transgenders being looked down upon, and they are the lowest at the lowest stratum of the society, mainly because they don't get education. So my question is, if you are a girls' college, I think this should be in the NEP 2020, this should be introduced that at the time of admission, trans should be included in a girls' college. We don't have, because I come from a girls' college, in the admission form, we don't have a separate column mentioning gender. It's assumed that anyone who comes is a female. So I feel that until and unless the society is open about accepting, so what happens if a trans comes and the trans is supposed to hide the identity, which should not be the case. We should be more inclusive in our attitude. So what is your take on this, Swati? Because this is a very a problem that we are facing now. More and more people ask us that you are a girls' college. Do you admit trans people? And we say, no, we don't admit trans. I mean, no admission has come saying that they are trans, but then we don't even have the provision of that category in our admission form. I think we should be having.
So, see, what happened is most of the universities or colleges that are established in a state under the state legislations or central legislations, such as say State University Act or by any Central University Act. But whatever, see, Supreme Court is the guardian to the Constitution, right? And whatever the judgment and law passed by the Supreme Court is becomes applicable and becomes law of the land by virtue of Article 141 of the Constitution, where a judgment passed by the Supreme Court is applicable to all the subordinate court and the High Court, and also to the other authorities within the territory of India. So now when it says authorities or other authorities, it includes each and every state authorities, central authorities, everyone. So in that case, what we see is National Legal Service Authority judgment, which came in 2014. It says that transgender should be treated as other backward classes, socially and economically backward classes, and they should be given a reservation in each and every educational institution and public appointments. By that direction, it also applicable to all the university, colleges, other authorities everywhere. Also, if you see Section 14 of the newly enacted Transgender Act 2019, it says you cannot prohibit any transgender from getting education or reservation in educational institutions, or whether you cannot prohibit any trans persons in participating job employment opportunities or participating in sports or recreational activities. Chapter 3 also talks about, of that act, Transgender Act 2019, also talks about prohibition on discrimination. So in that case, if the college is meant for girls, then you can also keep a 1% or 2% reservation for transgenders as well. There's nothing hard on that. So at least what you can do is, because more than the boys and that gender neutral colleges and universities which are only meant for girls have a much more safer space for the trans persons. And whenever professors like you will be available there, so they will have much more trans-friendly environment.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swati ma'am, for your insights. I think that was a very insightful session. Myself, Swapna Joshi, member of WDC of Nagindas Khandwala College, feeling proud to propose vote of thanks for this session. First,
1 minute, Swapna. I've inserted 2 questions in the chat box. Can they be taken up, or are we running against time?
No, you can take up. Swapna can take up.
Sorry to interrupt, Swapna.
Yes. Swati ma'am, there are 2 questions posted in the chat box by Neeta Dhote ma'am. She's a very senior faculty. Ma'am, want to ask you about, did transgenders suffered in any manner during pandemic in legal field or elsewhere in society?
See, what happened is during this pandemic, the government of India as well as the state governments. Now, state governments are both Maharashtra and other states as well. What they have given 2 datas, male and female, who died of COVID-19. But have you seen any data describing that trans person died of COVID-19? Where that data gone? No one knows. because there are also some of the trans members who died of COVID-19. If you go to the various medical facilities which are meant for male and female, you will be finding that neither the state nor the center has created any separate camp for transgenders. The hospitals which were converted into a COVID hospitals, that are also been meant for male and female. So think that situation, that how we have to undergo. See, also what happened during this pandemic is, I personally, what I did in Assam, in Northeast, is I started, and see, again we can see the mentality over here. What mentality? Recently, again we are going to start the second, the crowdfunding drive. During the first pandemic, when the first pandemic arrived, during that moment we started crowdfunding. And why that crowdfunding was being done? The crowdfunding was being done to purchase some of the grocery items, so that can be distributed among them. Otherwise, their livelihood is based on begging, and which got halted by this COVID-19 and lockdown procedures. So what we did is, we purchased some of the grocery and we started distributing that. I personally purchased, more than 5,000 masks, N95 masks during those days, which used to be cost approx 230 or 300 rupees when the first pandemic arrived. Now the price has came down, but ultimately during that moment of time, it was very much higher. The sanitizers bottles, each bottle used to be for 50, 60 or 100 rupees, So that we did, but we got not a single help. But yes, on the second pandemic, when the Delta pandemic arrived, what happened is that Akshay Patra came forward. That Akshay Patra came, that Swamiji came, and he personally visited my chamber and my home, and he gave me 5,000 ration kits to be distributed among the transgender persons. So on the second pandemic, we did the crowdfunding because the Akshay Patra came forward, and now the Omicron has again arrived, and there are lots of difficulties, and lots of restrictions are going. The people has to undergo, depending on the standard of procedures that has been implemented by the state government. So again, we will be starting up a crowdfunding to help our trans sisters and brothers. See, in this question, while answering this question, I remember one question that Devjani asked me, that all transgenders are not fortunate. Even I was also not fortunate. When I had to fight for my own right, when I felt that I am trapped in a wrong body, you guys will be remembering it was the year 2012 when I approached the first Bombay High Court for my sex reassignment surgery, and where each and every newspaper in everywhere, in Mumbai, Mirror, in DNA newspapers, everywhere. Then Bidhan Barua wants to change her sex. It was everywhere in the newspaper during the year 2012. It was everywhere, and the Bombay High Court during those days came forward and made a landmark judgment that sex reassignment surgery is also permissible if anyone who is an adult by virtue of Article 21 of the Constitution. And that became the first transgender landmark judgment from the Bombay High Court. And after that, I came back from Mumbai. I came back again to Assam. I started working up here. And during those time when I was fighting for my own identity, I was thrown out by my own parents. I was forced to leave my home. But the necessary support which I got, like when I see all of you, it makes me remember my all professors who helped me, who came forward and helped me to achieve what I am today. I did my higher education. I didn't stop, but all these difficulties what I had to face, it didn't stop my each and everything. The fight for my rights were on the other side, but also I kept on completing my education, and thereafter I completed my BCom honors. Then I completed my CS company secretary for my CSI. Then I did my LLB honors. Then I did my LLM. And at present I'm practicing. So this is a situation at the same time where also you have to keep hope and trust on yourself as well. And the same is the case here also in pandemic, that हर तरफ न्यूज देख के कोई डर मत जाओ. Trust on yourself. Trust on yourself. These are, see, when Lord Buddha, for the first time, when Gautam Buddha came out of his, came out for traveling, what he saw is for the first time, he saw a people is suffering from a disease. A people is died and taken away. चार कंधों में मृत व्यक्ति को लेकर जा रहे हैं. So these are the 4 things. When Lord Buddha for the first time saw and queried his, chariot, that what are these things? And for the first time, Lord Buddha came to know that, okay, these are some of the things which people can't get rid of. That people has to undergo disease, people has to suffer disease, and the day will come when people have also required to leave his body. So these are some of the things that no doubt the pandemic is here. At the same time, we also have to keep trust on us and faith on us, and that should not low down our morals. But yes, in this present scenario, helping each other and taking a stand for each other becomes much more pertinent and important for everyone.
Thank you so much, Swati ma'am. Really, your insight were really inspiring for all of us. There is one more question in the chat box, but because of the shortage of time, I would like to take the session ahead and continuing with my vote of thanks. I would like to extend my gratitude towards our ever supporting and Dr. MC Jose for supporting us to conduct such empowering events. Thank you so much, Principal in Charge, Professor Dr. Moshmi Datta, Vice Principal Suchak Sir, and Dr. Mona Mehta for your guidance and always being with us. Thank you, Dr. Kavita Kalkoti, Conference Convener, and Dr. Preeti Tripathi, Co-Convener, for your initiative for this conference. Today's speaker, Swati Varua, addresses on the topic Gender Inequality Portrayed in Literature. And I must say that ma'am is having a very thorough knowledge of Indian culture and Indian literature. Ma'am rightly stated that in Vedic period, women has given remarkable social importance. But post-Vedic period, the scenario has drastically changed and women are facing lots of social inequalities and discrimination. And we all must think that why social acceptance has changed drastically. Madam has addressed a lot of social issues and keep the ball rolling with all of us to change this negative mindset with education and self-independence and regain our position and social status, which we all women deserve since ancient time. Thank you so much, Swati Madam, for your positivity and inspiring thoughts which you shared today with us. Thank you, dear faculty members from our college as well as from other college for joining with us today. Thank you, Women's Study Center and WTC members and student volunteers for their assistance and excellent teamwork. Now the feedback form will be posted in the chat box. The volunteers will be posting and all the participants are requested to fill up the feedback form for this session. Now I will request my co-host, Dr. Vaishali ma'am, to take over the session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you everyone, and for all of your kind information, me Marathi bolto hai.
I would also request everybody to please on their camera since we have all the 3 resource persons we can have a photograph.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Moshmi there?
Because the momentum has picked up. No, I don't want to break.
Obviously, those persons are there with us.
Yes, yes. Singing the
Yes.
song now.
The geotag photo is taken.
Devja, this one.
Jemima, is this done? Jemima?
I think Mona can help us out. Mona,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you don't
I'll
mind.
take it. I'll take
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Everybody keep your smiles on. I'll take the photograph. Just give me a moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's been very interesting listening to all the speakers today.
I know, we're
and-
all carried away actually.
Yes, yes. Just one moment. Yeah. Rekha ma'am, are you there, ma'am?
Yeah, Rekha ma'am is also there.
Okay, not somehow able to see, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah, Rekha ma'am is not there.
Yeah, we cannot see her in the
We
screen.
cannot see her.
I think she left the meeting. That's what one meant.
All right. Everybody, please. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank
Now
you,
we're
Mona.
all geotags
Thank you,
all the
Mona,
time. Yeah.
Thanks, Mona.
May
Thank
I
you, Swati
Kavita?
madam. It was really nice, looking into the realities of which you have picked up.
And then you're very courageous. It takes a lot of courage to do what you've
Yes.
done and what you've gone through.
Yes.
And it was brilliant hearing you, and we also get an idea how to manage these situations.
Thanks for your response, Swati ma'am.
Yeah. I think Vaishali has to carry it on.
Yes.
Vaishali, yeah.
Yes.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, one and all present today. I, Dr. Vaishali Godeswar, on behalf of WDC and Women Studies Center, welcome you all for the session 2 of today's webinar. It gives me immense pleasure, Department of Geography, Nirmala College, Ranchi. She has been appointed by Ranchi University, post-conquered by JPSC. She has a lot of international and national research, international papers to her credit. Her area of expertise is geography, gender studies, environmental studies, disaster management, earth sciences, research methodology, and the list goes on. We are very happy to see you, ma'am, and we are all very eager to hear you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vaishali, for introducing me to the house. At the onset, I'd like to congratulate the organizers for such a nice conference, wherein you look forward to the future. We've in the last 2 years, we have had so much about COVID that the very theme, reinventing strategies, is so very interesting. So I would like to extend my thanks to the director, Dr. Ansi Jose, the in-charge principal, Professor Moshmi Datta, Dr. Vijay Suchak, Vice Principal, Dr. Mona Mehta, Vice Principal, Dr. Kavita Kalkoti, who is the convener, and Dr. Preeti Tripathi, the co-convener. Apart from that, I owe my regards to the two esteemed speakers who spoke before me, Professor Rekha Pandey, who is a very well-known person in the field of gender studies, and Swati Bidhan Barua, a well-known advocate, and also a very passionate speaker as far as gender is concerned. So today I consider it my privilege to be sharing stage with such two stalwarts. I don't know whether I'm up to their level in their level of knowledge and expertise in the subject, but I'll try my best to contribute. And in this journey, I would like to get some feedback from you people so that I can improve myself when I speak next. So reinventing strategies post-COVID is a very interesting topic. And when the topic was first suggested by the Nagindas College, I jumped at gender challenges in lives and livelihood post-COVID scenario. Maybe this was because I was doing a project with the Women's Commission on informal workers. And the money for the project came almost with the onset of COVID. So I had difficulty in assessing the subjects of my research. And but at the same time, I came to know what problems they were facing during COVID. So livelihood, how livelihood was affected, especially for the informal sector, for the unorganized sector, that became, a subject of interest. So I took it up today so that I could share some of my experiences with you. Now, gender issues is very interdisciplinary and it's cross-national in scope. Everyone speaks of gender, and sometimes we very loosely speak of gender. We associate it with sex. Sex and gender are two different things, and that has to be understood first. Sex is a biological construct, and gender is a social construct. The very term gender was introduced in the 60s by feminist speaker Simone de Beauvoir. When we speak of gender, we should speak in an inclusive way. We should speak of gender equality or gender equity, keeping in mind that there is discrimination, there is inequality. And that is not only between the men and the women, not only between a male and a female. We cannot afford to neglect the third gender. And the third gender is very much a part of the society. And today, while we were discussing, there was a very pertinent question put up by Professor Neeta Dhote, that what happened to the transgenders during pandemic? There's absolutely no data. When we look up for data, when a gender commission comes and asks us that, do you have any transgenders in our college? We don't have an answer because the form of a college, admission form of a college doesn't speak of a transgender. I mean, if you are a woman, you are admitted in the college because it's a girls' college. But if you're a transgender, why you have no place to mention that you're a transgender. So why should the identity of a person, a gender identity of a person, be hidden? One should be proud of gender identity. So over the years, this has been a subject of debate, and the COVID that we faced in the last 2 years, like all other crises, it's a crisis. It's a health crisis. It's an economic crisis. It's a psychological crisis, a sociological crisis. Now, this crisis has some way or the other placed all our lives in a jeopardy. And today, when we sit across the table, you and me, we are fortunate that we have studied so much. We can speak up. We have the right to speak our minds. Our voices are being heard. But just imagine those voices which were not heard. What happened during the first lockdown? What happened to the lives and livelihood of the people during the first lockdown? Suddenly, in March, a lockdown is announced, and people do not know how to react to it. So for the first 2-3 weeks, we had somehow managed, because the government came out with a lot of Sita Raman, our finance minister, she told us about a number of strategies that the government had taken up to look after the people who were stranded in different parts of the country, but were thrown out of work. But just imagine the second time the lockdown took place in April. 3 weeks after the first lockdown, the continuation of lockdown, the second lockdown is announced. And we don't know how to react to it. Now, the people did not know whether they would be kept back in their jobs or they would be forced to go back, because the employers, they themselves didn't know what the future was. So without an option, they walk back home. So is this a country which is the most, we call ourselves one of the most liberated, progressive country. We have a long cultural history. We have always treated women as Durga and Devi, and those women are made to walk on the roads. Some of them pregnant, some of them carrying their infant child. They go without water, they go without food. What is it? This is discrimination, not between gender. It is between the powerful and the powerless. The powerful sit in their homes because they have a home. The powerless have nothing to do but walk on the streets. So with this thought, I'd just like to share my presentation. And as I am sharing, I'll be dealing with the remaining part of my talk. So I have some trouble with this. Is it visible?
Are you presenting?
No? Yeah, I'm trying to present. So,
should I present? I have got it in my desktop.
Okay, if you can present, it is good because I have some problem with this Google. I'm not very familiar.
Jenny Madam, you can mail it to any one of us.
I have it. Kavita has got it.
Kavita has got it. Kavita, you can play.
Yeah. So, thank you, Kavita. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, like I said, that over the years, gender equality has been a subject of debate, and there have been massive efforts to. The first slide only, Kavita. Please keep it in the first slide.
You just tell me when to change.
Yeah, I'll tell you when to change. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you keep it in the first slide, Kavita, please. So we have tried to understand gender equality, the determinants of equality, its consequences on women and society, its consequences on the third gender, and appropriate policies have been framed to advance women's equality. We've always kept in mind that man and women should be equal. We have somewhere down the line neglected the third gender. So the second slide that is there, that you are seeing over there, that shows us the main gender issues. What are the main gender issues that we have? There are 4 pictures. The first picture on the topmost corner, left-hand corner, is that of gender identity. Gender identity, because each one is different. We all have an identity of our own. Someone may be fat, someone may be thin, someone may be dark, someone may have black hair, someone may have white hair. So someone may be educated, someone may not be educated. So there are differences in appearances. So there's diversity. Coming to the next photograph that has been put just below the top photograph, that is of gender diversity, then comes identity. So what is your identity? When we have people fighting for their rights, like it's a picture where trans rights, people are fighting for their rights, that means they have a problem of identity. They are in a society, but they do not know what their identity is. Now, the identity cannot be binary. Over the years, we have studied through gender that it is not binary. You cannot be just a male or a female. You can be either a male or a female. You can be both. You can be a man trapped in a woman's body. You can be a woman trapped in a man's body. You can be a transgender, transvestite. You can be a queer. And we respect each and everyone because every individual is unique. Every individual deserves rights. Every individual deserves to have dignity. Then we come to the third photograph, which talks of equity, that is equal opportunities. Now, when we talk of equal opportunities in a society, we cannot just say that we are giving equal opportunities. I'll give an example. When we started with online classes, we quickly switched over to, online mode of teaching so the students could access our classes through WhatsApp. But did we ever try to find out if each person in the household has a mobile phone. Sometimes it so happens that there is only one mobile phone and there are 3 or 4 siblings who have to access the same class. And I think Rekha madam has very elaborately said about this. So where is equity? You're not giving them the equal opportunity. When you give them a chance to come to schools, do you give them a chance not to be dropped out? We don't give them the chance. Very often a girl comes and tells that she cannot continue studies because her father is not in a position to finance her education. There is no policy which says that if the father cannot finance the education, then the college bears the entire responsibility. Why? Because no college can afford to bear the responsibility of all the girls, because the axe always falls on the girl. When education has to stop, then the girl's father first tries to stop the girl's education. The boy is given a free hand to continue the education. So there is no equity at any level. Either you can have equity in policies, but you cannot have equity in reality. Then comes the last phase, is the equality part. When we talk about equality, then there's equality in every phase of life, whether it's work, whether it's pay, whether it's food, whether it's shelter, whether it's thought, whether it's action. Everywhere there should be equality. And that is where we go back. We lack this. Kavita, the next slide, please. Yes. So the United Nations talks about gender equality with an emphasis on female education as part of Millennium Development Goals.
Just give me 1 second. I'll have to present the full screen. Just give me 1 second.
Yes. So the United Nations talks about female education as part of Millennium Development Goals and gender equality at large as one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved by 2030. We are in 2022 and very sorry to say that we have not been able to reach midway yet. There has been a lot of progress. If we go on to the details, there has been a lot of progress over the last few decades with women having more access to education, more access to resources, women holding position of power, of leadership, of being major decision makers, of having control over their lives, their finances. The world has progressed. The lives of women has progressed. More and more girls are coming to schools. More and more girls are going for higher education. Fewer girls are facing early marriage. More women are serving in parliament. More women are becoming CEOs of companies. There are laws being reformed to advance gender equality. But yet, challenges remain. You cannot say that there are no challenges. Next slide, please. So what are the major challenges? First and foremost, discriminatory law. Like Swati ma'am had said that there is discriminatory law, Mitakshari law and the other law. You have laws, different laws of inheritance. The Nayars, Nambiars of Kerala, they have a matriarchal form of family where the woman of the family inherits the father's property, not the man. But elsewhere in India, even I come from a tribal state of Jharkhand. In Jharkhand also, tribal laws do not allow women to inherit. So where is the law of inheritance? Why can't a woman inherit a father's property? Why only Sri Dhan at the time of marriage? So there are discriminatory laws. There are regressive social norms that are all pervasive. Women continue to be underrepresented at various levels of political leadership. We have women as Gram Pradhan, Panchayat Pradhan. But in place of that woman, we have her husband who takes the major decision. It is the Panchayat Pradhan Pati who is more prominent. He comes out, he speaks on behalf of his wife. The wife, just because it is a reserved seat, the wife takes up the seat, but the wife has no say in anything. And the most shameful thing is that 1 out of every 5 women still continues in an experience of physical and sexual violence by an intimate partner. And this is not just made up data. The UN says that this has happened and this has been exaggerated during the pandemic. So the major challenge that you see on your screen is 3. There are 3 different pictures. The first challenge is that of gender identity, where the boy is obviously placed a little above the girl. Okay, this you can see it in your picture. The second problem that we face is of gender norms, where it is believed that the people will follow only those occupations that conform with their gender. That is occupational segregation. You will have women as caregivers, women as nurses. You will have men as doctors. And that is what brings me to the third problem, that of stereotyping. You see, there are 2 different colors. One is blue, one is pink. Blue is associated with male. Pink is associated with women. And with women, we associate all softer attributes like weakness, emotional, and soft, pretty, lovely, beautiful. हम कहते हैं ना कि लड़की बड़ी सुशील है, सुंदर है. हम कभी नहीं कहते कि लड़का बड़ा सुशील है. लड़का बड़ा एम्बिशियस है, बहुत अच्छा कमाता है, बहुत अच्छा पे पैकेट है. So why stereotyping it? We do it. Unknowingly we do it. It is ingrained in each one of us. So girls and women suffer most from the negative impact of rigid gender norms and roles, and they're more likely to experience restrictions from freedom, restrictions of mobility. They are, you see, we had a Pinjra Tod Andolan in Pinjra Tod movement in Jamia Millia some time back. Why? Because there was a restriction that girls could not stay out of the hostel beyond 8 p.m. 8 p.m. was the curfew hour. So the women, the girls in the hostel, they launched a movement, Pinjra Tod. Why should a girl be caged? Why can't she take care of herself? Why should she be insecure after 8 p.m. in Delhi? Delhi is the capital of India. So these things, you know, we experience more restrictions from our freedom of mobility, and we experience violence outside at home, also harassment at workplaces, everywhere. And so this is what is discrimination. Gender discrimination describes the situation in which people are treated differently. That is gender discrimination. It is now not how a boy is treated or how a girl is treated. How an individual is treated differently simply because they belong to a particular gender. They are judged by their gender, not on the basis of their individual skills and capabilities. So the crux of the whole problem, the challenge is this. So can we move on? Yeah. So the 3 key to gender equality challenges, there are many. For me, because I come from an academic background, the first is, according to me, a leaky pipeline. You see, there's a leaky pipeline at the middle of your screen. A leaky pipeline, it's called a STEM pipeline. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and medicine. It is an it's an all man's world. You see men opting for science stream, women opting for art stream, not because cognitive ability is different, not because academically they are inferior. It is because they are, coaxed, they are influenced by their parents not to take up this subject. आखिर शादी तो करनी है, साइंस पढ़ के करोगी क्या? तुमको नौकरी थोड़ी ना करनी है. This type of a stereotype attitude that a girl needs to look after the house, therefore she need not take up a challenging subject like science or engineering or medicine. So what happens? You have a leaky pipeline, you have dropouts at different levels, at 10, at 12, then further on in graduation, then further on in post-graduation, and finally when you come to the level of PhD or research work, you have lesser and lesser women opting for it if it is a pure science stream. I agree that women make up for the CEOs. If you just Google, you'll find there are many women CEOs. There, but they make up only 5%. And 14% of executive committee of Fortune 500 companies. Across all industries, as you climb up the corporate ladder, you will see fewer and fewer women. I was speaking yesterday in Coal India, and there we had executives at the E3 level. I mean, they join at E2 level and E3 level. So there were plenty of girls sitting and attending my lecture. But then when I asked them that how many of you aim to reach the topmost E9 level, that is the topmost level of executive, they had doubts in their mind. Somewhere down the line or somewhere down the path to the top, they have to leave. Why do they have to leave? Because they have to take care of other commitments, the family, sometimes what happens, I was told by them yesterday, sometimes what happens, they are given a promotion. Along with the promotion, they get a transfer. They do not accept the promotion because if they are transferred, what will happen to the child? There's no one to take care of the child. But if it's a man, he can take up the work and he can go, he can take up the additional charges that are given to him. Then there's something called glass ceiling, which is very common in industry. Glass ceiling is a metaphor which is used to represent an invisible barrier that keeps women from rising beyond a certain level. So, from the very start of their careers, women face difficulties. They are at the entry level, they are not taken at par with men. So, if there are 10 recruitments, they will have 3 women and 7 men. If it's an industry, if it's a hardcore industry, I'm not talking about academics. So that type of disparity exists over there. Then there is something called gender gap. If you look to the left of your screen, you will find a gender pay gap. So women earn less than men, and everyone knows that. Very rarely we have both of them hired at an equal pay scale, and that is not in India only, it's there all over the world. On an average, globally, women earn 23% less than men because they are hired. They work more, but they are paid less. And this payment, even bonus, in UK, traders get bonus. Male traders get bonus. Female traders do not get bonus. So this is the disparity of pay that exists. Then again, the highest paid female CEO in the US, Martine Rothbard, is the chairwoman of United Therapeutics. That person was born a male. So whether she fought her way to get the highest, to be the highest paid CEO, I am not certain. But then also you see there is a male attribute to it. Talking about occupational segregation, we find that there are different types of jobs assigned to different types of gender. Women are given those jobs as caregivers. They are nurses. You don't have a male nurse. Very rarely nowadays, of course, you're having male nurse. But nurses are usually female. If you talk about kindergarten teachers, all kindergarten teachers are female. You don't have male kindergarten teachers. You have male teachers only in higher education, only in schools, colleges, and other places. Then women choose traditional career path. They are more into softer type of skills. Although they may be skilled in other things also, they prefer or choose softer skills rather than go for hardcore like defense. Like women are joining. I cannot say that they are not joining. There are women in defense, there are women in Air Force, Army, Navy, everywhere. Just the Republic Day parade showed the Navy contingent being led by a woman, and I, being a woman, I feel very proud of that. But the percentage is very limited. And that is because of not getting support from the peer group, not getting support from the family, from the society, everywhere. You just heard what Swati ma'am said, that she had to fight her own family to get her identity established. Now this, if you are fighting every day, you have to become a real fighter. And that is what our real challenge is. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, this is the challenge during the pandemic. You can see a collage of pictures. I didn't want to write too many things. I just wanted you to have a feel of what it was during the pandemic. Right from having online offices, online meetings, online classes, to people walking down the roads, to news channels giving us all pathetic information and scary news all the time. Now, for the last 22 years, extreme poverty globally has been declining. And that has been told by the US. But once the COVID-19 came, and with it came massive job losses, shrinking of economies, loss of livelihood, then what happened? We went back. We went back a generation. And the different areas that got affected, according to me, because my lecture is on lives and livelihood. So I chose the three main things that were affected. One is health, one is life at home and beyond, and the third is the livelihood. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So the health and well-being. Now, you might say that COVID-19 was a severe crisis, health crisis for all. Men, women, everyone was affected. It did not choose any region, any sex, any religion. It affected everyone. Yet the virus has taken a disproportionate toll on the physical and mental health of women. I'll tell you how. You see, Spain, one of the first countries which had the onslaught of COVID-19, Spain and Hungary, they revealed that the women reported greater stress and anxiety during the initial stage of lockdown, because Spain had announced a lockdown before us in early 2020. And the stress was felt by the women more. Then what happened? The COVID-19 pandemic put the women's physical and reproductive health in a jeopardy. How? See, in Brazil, in India, in Nepal, the funds that were reallocated for, the funds that were allocated for women's maternal and reproductive health, that was reallocated for the care of COVID-19 patients. Then what happened? It exposed sharp economic and social inequalities. The rich could afford a better treatment. The poor could not afford. The vulnerable could not. And they did not know how to cope up with the disease. And the physical and mental health of the women went for a toss when they faced gender-based violence. Then there was problem with healthcare access. At many places, healthcare access got disrupted. Why? Because private clinics had to be shut down. PPE kits were not available. There was no provider. And because there was no transport, so people could not reach the health system, health centers. So because of this, there was a serious health crisis. There was disruption in the supply chain. And with travel restriction, women could not access medical facility. Many underwent abortions. And unknowingly, This created a huge crisis, and sexual and reproductive health of women, it suffered a collateral damage. And in Nepal, maternal deaths increased, which is very shocking because maternal deaths had decreased over the years. In places like Uganda, adolescent girls reported abuse at home. The UNDP shared a very frightening data that globally around 243 million women and girls suffered from physical and sexual abuse in 2020. So all was not well in the women's world. Coming to the next part, life at home and beyond. So by now we know that women played a disproportionate role while responding to the virus. Why? Because women were healthcare workers also. We have seen many women in PPE kit leaving their homes, going out to help others. So they were healthcare workers in form of matrons, in form of nurses, in form of doctors, in form of, primary health workers everywhere. Household and childcare responsibilities also increased because the child was at home, the child needed attention. Everywhere in the world, you see that education is a woman's department. A mother is supposed to take care of the child's education. So the mother was juggling between doing her own work online, juggling with the classes of her children. And then if there was a patient at home, the mother was responding to the patient, the woman of the house was responding to the needs of the patient. And finally, if there were aged people like the in-laws or the parents staying with them, schools continued to remain closed, daycare centers remained closed. There was reduced availability of domestic help because first thing that we did was stop the domestic help from coming into the house, thinking that the virus would be brought by them. I'll come to that later on. I'll come to that when I'm talking about livelihood, which I felt that we had not done the right thing by stopping domestic help from coming to our homes. It is not they who brought the disease. The virus was there. It was there in the air. And that is what when we had the Delta virus, there it became all the more prominent. We had, during the first lockdown, we had stopped the domestic help from entering the house. What happened during the second lockdown? Same thing. So after keeping them away from the house, when we reopen our house and we are getting back to normal, suddenly we feel that we are again infected by Delta virus. And then what do we do with our domestic health? Do we throw them again outside the house? No. That was not the right move. So with reduced help from domestic help, the whole stress, the whole responsibility that was on the women of the household. Coming to the third thing, that is livelihood. I began this lecture with the saying that livelihood was the worst affected. We presented a very, very shameful picture to the world. The whole world watched as people walked down the streets, pregnant, with infant children, without food, without water. They were walking because somehow they wanted to reach their houses. Some Samaritans came outside, helped those people to reach their homes. But on the whole, the livelihood was in a very, very shameful condition, especially for India, which has such a big demographic dividend. We boast of our demographic dividend, we boast of our youth, we boast that we will be the next biggest economy because we have a large workforce. How do we treat our workforce? How do we treat our women? So these globally, women and members of the minority gender group, they tend to earn less. They tend to save less. They hold less scarce job and they are more likely to be employed in informal sectors. Now, this is what the UN says, that most of the women, most of the underprivileged, they are working in, you can keep in the previous slide, Kavita. Yeah, thank you. So this is what is happening in livelihood. These conditions make the women more vulnerable to the economic impact of COVID-19. They are insecure. They don't have any savings. They don't have a provident fund or a pension fund or a gratuity at the end of their service. So whatever little they earn, they try to save. Then we have a very bad debt credit system. We don't have a good credit system. There are things like bad debt, and there are microfinance, which do not go a long way to help the rural poor or the women. So COVID-19, which has been colloquially termed as C-session, like recession, we have a C-session, S-H-E, C-session. It is a female-dominated service sector where jobs first disappear. Why is it called a C-session? Because the jobs of the women first disappeared. And this was found by a study by Gupta et al. In 2020. Male-dominated sectors, for example, construction sector, manufacturing sector, where we have more male, they continued to thrive. The axe fell on the informal sector, on the unorganized sector, and women make up 93% of the unorganized sector. So who were the target? The women were the target. Moreover, women did not, if they were in the healthcare sector, they were frontline in the pandemic. So they were at a risk also. Now, according to a report by McKinsey Global Institute, MGI study of women, they said that women make up 39% of the global employment, but account for 54% of the global losses. So McKinsey studied this in 2021 and came up with the report that 39% of the global employment is women employment, but they contributed to more job losses. Overall job losses 54%, because certain sector where women were employed, for example, retail, many shops were shut down. Entertainment in the form of, in movie halls, you had women who were working as lift women, or they were in the front desk, or they were selling tickets. All those were shut down. So because of that, women lost their jobs. Then one reason for greater effect that this COVID-19 had on women is because they lost their jobs even in the food sector. Sometimes what happens, you can say that women started their own business. Yes, they started their own business, but when there was a choice being made as to whom to keep, whether the men or the women, the hotel industry, they opted for the men to be kept back, because the men could double up as service, as providing service to the customer, while women would not be able, like Swiggy and Zomato, when they were tying up with Swiggy and Zomato, and the big hotels were shifting from dining to delivery, then the women were retrenched. And statistics say that. So in general, there was increased unemployment amongst women, and women had to go back to the traditional gender roles, that you are a caregiver, you look after the family, you do the work. So now you're without employment. The domestic workers, they were in a dire state. At home, the husband is unemployed. There are no finances. And the woman of the house, she's also unemployed because she's a domestic help. So everywhere it is the woman that is suffering. Now, can we move on to the next slide? Okay, so now this UN report says that compounded economic effects, impacts were felt especially by women because they were earning less. I've already told you that. And they were impacted through reallocation of resources. This I've already said. Moving on. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now we see the women's participation. They constitute half of the total population, almost, not exactly. Women perform 2/3 of the work hours. So if it's a 24-hour work, 24-hour day, women work for almost 16 hours. whether it's paid work, whether it's unpaid work. Women receive only 1/10 of the world's income, and they own even less, 1/100th of the world's property. So women are in a very precarious state, whether it's COVID or whether it's not. Next one, please. So why crisis hits a woman harder? So this is a basic question. Firstly, the woman is earning less. When you see the pay package, then there is a discrimination. Even if it is not in the initial stage, somewhere up the ladder, there is a discrimination. Women have fewer savings because they have no control over their own savings. Very often, I hear my own colleagues, they say that, oh, I don't know, कौन से mutual fund में पैसा है, मेरे husband सारा कुछ, when it comes to IT returns, मेरे husband सारा कुछ manage करते हैं, मैं तो IT returns नहीं भरती हूँ. Why don't we know what our savings are? Why can't we have total control? And sometimes the husband buys property in the wife's name without the wife even knowing that she has a property. You know, there is a provision in Jharkhand that if you buy a property of 50 lakhs, even if it's a piece of land or if it's a flat, if you buy a property in a woman's name, you just have to pay 1 rupee as registration fee. And because of that, you know, men are just jumping forward and registering the property if it's less than 50 lakhs in their wife's name, in their daughter's name, in their mother's name. But the mother or the wife has no idea because the husband says that it's my money, I'm using my name just to evade the registration tax. So women, they don't have any savings. Women are disproportionately more in informal economy. Like I said, 93% of them are in informal sector. In informal sector, you don't have any social security, any economic security. Tomorrow, if a woman is retrenched from work, she does not even have the liberty to approach a trade union, and because she's in an informal sector. And no one takes up the case because the woman does not have the courage also. So every day she's working with an axe that is hanging above her head. Women have less access to social protection. Most of the time, they are unaware of their laws. They are unaware of even if it's a domestic violence, even if the in-laws are not treating her properly, she doesn't know whom to confide because the society or the family will always say, no, you go back to your in-laws, you stick with them, you look after them, try to make this marriage work. It's good. A marriage should work. But at what cost? Not at the cost of life, not at the cost of dignity. So there was a movie which came recently, Thappad, and there was a question, ek thappad hi to tha. It is not a question of domestic violence just once. It is not about one thappad. It is the thappad that is hurting the dignity of a woman. Why should the dignity of a woman be hurt? So women are more likely to be burdened with unpaid care, domestic work, and therefore they drop out of labor force. Even if a woman is working as a dihadi mazdoor, if she's going to work every day, the moment her ailing mother-in-law comes from the village, she has to take care of that and she drops from going to work. The first thing the woman, because the man is the bread earner, the man has to go. The woman quite willingly gives up her work and she takes care of the ailing mother-in-law. And women make up majority of single-parent households. Now, the recently released report shows that the pandemic will push 96 million people into extreme poverty by 2021. And of them, 47 million people will be girls and women. So it is a very, very frightening statistics. The pandemic-induced poverty surge will widen gender poverty gap, meaning more women will be pushed into extreme poverty than men. This is especially the case amongst those who are aged 25 to 34. That is, they are at the height of their productive and family formation period. So, the resurgence of extreme poverty is a result of this pandemic. Women's paid labor and women-run business, they are the hardest hit. The most impacted industries that have been hit by the pandemic are those that are run by women or those that have more women. But just talking about the problem is not the end to a problem. We have to think of solutions. We have to think of ways to coming up with this. So the last slide, Kavita, ma'am. Yeah. So now I come to the 5 steps of recovery. These steps of recovery are nothing to do with the entire pandemic. These are the steps of recovery to lives and livelihood of women. How can we move forward? What steps should we take? What should be our approach? Because see, this crisis is not the first one and neither will it be the last one. We already had SARS, MERS, we had Ebola. Before that, we had a century back, we had a crisis also. But today's crisis is different because it is affecting women in a very different way. So recovery efforts must reach women. And despite the clear gendered implication of crisis, response and recovery efforts, they tend to ignore the needs of the women. And that is why I have given 5 points, 5 tips, how we can move forward. The first one is for the working women, direct income support to women. Here, I'm not talking about people like you and me who receive a salary at the end of the month. We are very privileged. I'm talking about those working women in the informal sector. So what can we do for them? Direct income support to women. See, we have already gone digital. So we can introduce economic support packages, which include direct cash transfers. It can go digitally. Don't hand over cash to the domestic worker. You can give it digitally to her so that she can access digitally. She learns how to access it digitally. Her husband cannot take the money from the wife and the husband cannot go and spend it on his drinks. We can expand unemployment benefits. We can give tax breaks for those like us. We can, and we already had some tax relief last year. Then expanded family and child benefits also can be given. The second is for women in business. Many businesses are owned and led by women. Now, businesses owned and led by women should receive specific grants and stimulus funding because during this pandemic, what they lost was their corpus fund as well as subsidized and state-backed loans. Things were not being sold. During my course of survey, I went and visited many such women entrepreneurs who kept on saying that, see, all the things are being made and kept, but they are not being sold. Tax burden should be eased and wherever possible, the government should source food, PPE and other essential supplies to women-led businesses so that they can continue working. Even with the PPE, they can continue to work and they can continue to keep the economy rolling. Economic relief should similarly target sectors and industries where women are in large proportion. The third, again, is for women workers. Support for women workers, how? By implementing gender responsive social protection system to support income security of women. You see, Bangladesh became a country in 1971. Bangladesh was behind us in all parameters till recently. Recently, Bangladesh has jumped forward, and where we are lagging in maternal mortality or child health or maternal health, they have improved dramatically. Women have access to credit. They have access to microfinance, which unfortunately is missing in our case. So if Bangladesh can do it in such a short time, we were liberated much before Bangladesh. Why can't we do that? Then expanded access to affordable and quality childcare services. Like in the West, they have childcare services. If a woman is going to work, and she has to carry her child along with her. Why can't we have a creche which will look after the child? We don't have such infrastructure. There is no toilet also. A woman has to control herself and cannot relieve herself until and unless she finishes her work. There are many such places where we have that. Bridging the gender gap, pay gap, that is urgent. And it begins by enacting laws and policies which will guarantee equal pay for work of equal value. If a man and a woman, both of them are working for 8 hours, they should be given equal pay, irrespective of every other thing. You just can't say she's a woman, she comes late, she goes to take care of the child. Well, that is her right, her fundamental right to raise a child, to look after the child. But it is your duty to see that she is not affected by reducing her pay in any way. The fourth is to support informal workers again. We have to provide social protection and benefits to informal workers. For informal workers left unemployed, cash transfers, unemployment compensation, these can help to ease the financial burden. And this is how we can help to support those people, and most of the women are in the informal sector. And finally, reconciliation of paid and unpaid work. You see, there are two categories of work: paid work and unpaid work. Like Rekha ma'am was saying this morning, that when a woman is working at home, the domestic work is not treated as work, it is just unpaid work, because मेरी माँ कुछ नहीं करती है. She is just a homemaker, and a homemaker is not treated with that much of, praise and dignity. It's looked down upon. My mother is a mere homemaker. So this is the general concept. There should be a reconciliation of paid and unpaid work. Provide all primary caregivers with paid leave and reduced or flexible working arrangements. If you give them a very homely and a supportive atmosphere, if you provide workers with childcare services, if you give them a supportive environment, then you can get the best out of them. Then you can promote equity, you can promote equality, you can do away with discrimination. So finally, I'd just like to add that gender inequalities emerge and worsen during a crisis. And COVID-19 has shown us just that. We were living in a euphoria that everything is going on well. India's GDP is growing. We are becoming more. At the time of independence, we were only 9% literate, and now see we are almost 80% literate. So we are becoming financially independent. Women are being better represented in the parliament. We are having women-led businesses. Women are being more accepted in each and every profession. Good, that's all there. But once a crisis comes, then everything goes haywire. So putting women and girls at the center of economies, we have to put them at the center of economies. This will fundamentally drive towards a better and a sustainable world. And the goal that we are looking forward, the goal of equality, the goal of gender equality, of a better and a more human world, that can only be achieved if we move in the right direction, if we are inclusive in our attitude, and we try to make a more sustainable society. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. I would now like to take up questions if there are any.
Ma'am, I have one question. We always talk about the payment between men and women being, it's not at parity. Why? What is the reason? Is it that women don't ask for being paid more? Or what is the reason that contributes to it? It's there in metros also, besides tier 2 and tier 3 cities that we are looking at.
Yes. Now, there are many things. It's not just one point that women don't ask for it, or there are many areas where women and men are at par, like the civil services or the government sector, or we even in academics, everywhere. But when it comes to private, there they have the liberty of not paying the woman her due. And somewhere or the other, that mentality or the stereotype thought process runs that a woman will not be able to contribute fully to the company. So if the company is supposed to, you see, most of the companies are profit-oriented companies. They just look for profit. If you're looking for profit, then somewhere down the line, they feel that a woman, even if in the initial stage she's working hard and she's going up the ladder, somewhere down she will settle down, she'll get married, she'll have a family, she'll have to raise kids, and then she will not give her 100%. But it's not true. It's not true. Women, they work doubly hard. And your own principal, one morning she calls me up and she tells me that, she treats me like her elder sister. She says, I didn't go to sleep the whole night yesterday because commitments were such. She didn't go to sleep the whole night. I stay awake. I lose my sleep if my college needs me, if there is a commitment. And I'm sure, Dr. Mona, you also do the same. But somewhere, we are being judged not by our performance, not by our capabilities. We are judged by the mindset of the people who think that we are not able to contribute fully. So I think that creates a gender disparity somewhere down the line.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'd like to add something here.
Yes.
The other day I was reading about the research review by United States Congress Joint Economic Committee. Even they have said in USA, men and women, there is an income gap. So, generally we have in our mind in developed countries, Mona, they are at par. Okay, so I was quite astonished that even in education sector also, there is an income gap between the two. In fact, women earn 80% as 100% of the men. So, some surprising facts really we come to know that it is worldwide. This gap is worldwide actually.
Maushami, may I add that till today, we didn't have a female president in USA. Yes. Hillary Clinton tried so many times. But
yes,
a country as progressive as USA cannot even dream of having a female president. At least we, Sri Lanka and India, we are better off than them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe it doesn't come into the picture, as the third world countries come in.
Yes.
The developing countries are always in the picture, always in the highlight.
Yes.
But your talk was very, very enriching, Dipchani madam.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Data was so varied and so well explained.
It was very, very enriching.
Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed listening to Swati still there.
Yes.
She was there throughout. I still, I feel privileged. And Rekha madam was there in the morning, and Rekha madam spoke so well. And she touched that education sector in a right manner.
In a vivid manner.
Yeah. And it is really, really very nice. And thank you so much for having me over. And I could share the platform with two such stalwarts, very close to my heart. And NK College is also very close to my heart. And I can never forget the hospitality I got from NK College when I went there.
Ma'am, we look forward to having you
I know, we will see you
again offline.
Yes.
When we go offline, hoping
Yes.
someday we'll go offline. So thank you, all of you. And were there any students? I hope the students listened to the talk and they must have.
Yes. There were many students
There are
also,
many students.
because
Yes,
the
ma'am.
whole target is actually, the whole target is actually the
Students.
students, the youth, the future of the country. They will be the people who can bring in the change that is required.
Yes. Definitely.
Actually, till yesterday, till 12 o'clock, the committee was trying to roping more and more women in the conference, you know. They were also awake whole night. They were trying to rope in, you know.
But I feel that in a gender thing, we should have equal
More men,
representation.
yes.
Yes, men should.
Men actually.
Men, and we can all agree
Yeah,
to disagree.
on a lighter note, we just said in the committee, we just have Suchak sir and Dr. Vivek.
Yes. So I can see Dr. Vivek, and I saw Suchak sir in the morning. So really, we should have more men.
Actually, in NK College, we have woman power.
Yes. Your gender ratio is skewed. Yeah. Have that.
May I request Dr. Vivek Chaube sir to propose a vote of thanks?
Thank you, Vaishali madam. I will start with a stanza of Mahadevi Verma's poem. It is written in Hindi, and when we used to have our school days, during that time, this particular stanza, our teachers used to tell us. But the scenario has changed. What Moshmi madam has said, that in our college, women are empowered. So I visualize that same thing happens everywhere. So it was like this. Vistrit न बता कोई कोना, मेरा न कभी अपना होना, परिचय इतना इतिहास यही, उमड़ी कल थी मिट आज गई. इसका मतलब यही हुआ कि entire world, I cannot say that this particular corner is for me, and my all the enthusiasm and everything, vanishes in a very short span of time. This was the real picturization of a woman through literature by great Mahadevi Verma ji. With this note, thank you very much. My sincere thanks to our management, which is always ever supportive to entire, the teaching faculty and the management. Our director, Dr. Mrs. Nancy Jose, who happens to be our ex-principal, she is actually, I consider herself as an institution builder. So thank you, madam, for supporting us, for encouraging us, for motivating us. And whatever we are today, I think this is the blessings and guidance from Director Madam and Nancy Madam. Thank you very much. My sincere thanks to very enthusiastic, our principal, Dr. Moshmi Datta. She is always, I am a person who was not interested in research work, and I am revealing this, but through her encouragement and persuasion, I started with my research paperwork. And thank you, madam, for motivating this particular event to happen. And this particular webinar on a particular theme of, we can say, reinventing sustainable women empowerment strategies in post-COVID-19 scenario is something which is very, very apt. So our college has led under her guidance to adopt this particular webinar, and we have successfully, with such a, what you can say, expert speakers, and thoughtful, provoking this particular seminar and webinar, we are blessed. Thank you, Moshi madam. Our two vice principals, Dr. Mona Mehta, I feel no one can compete her as far as vote of thanks is concerned, but her smile, it motivates you. It always gives you something that you do something good, she will always compliment. If you are at the fault, she will correct it. So thank you, madam, for cooperating and make it happen to attend this webinar. And Suchak sir, same here. Suchak sir is always, in all the endeavors of the teachers as well as any event, Suchak sir will always be present. We take care that sir is not disturbed during the afternoon session, but even though sir is present in all the sessions. Thank you very much, sir, for always, supporting us in our cause. For this webinar, I have seen, right from the beginning, when we were in the planning stages, when we thought of having this, I think in the month of July or August, we had, a meeting of our WDC, and then madam decided. So Kavita madam, the convener of this particular webinar, and co-convener Dr. Priti Tripathi, they are always full of energy, full of, encouragement, and they have everything, was codified, that how we are going to implement it. Thank you, Kavita madam and Dr. Priti Tripathi madam, for making this particular event a great success. Apart from that, I am very much thankful to the speaker, Professor Rekha Pandey madam. The topic was COVID and its impact on education of girls. Madam touched upon the pandemic, the situations, and then she placed before us what is the real picture of India, whether the students, the girl students, because there is discrimination between men and the boys and girls and all this. So how they are being deprived of education and other facilities. So thank you very much, madam, for highlighting these issues in front of us as well as our students and this particular audience. I'm also very much thankful to Advocate Swati Barua madam. Through literature, she draw a live picture, right from the Vedas to the modern period. She was talking about the inclusion of women in armed forces also, and her own experience, what it has led to fight a particular case and then, proving your own existence. So it was a great learning experience. Madam Swati madam, thank you very much for giving us guidance as well as, your experience, sharing your experience also. And the last learned speaker of this particular webinar was Debjani madam, Debjani Roy madam. Thank you very much. You have touched upon the stereotype, how the women are stereotyped, that this particular work a woman cannot do. This particular color is only confined to the male or, female or something like that. This should be avoided from our society. And I personally feel that we should not have any discrimination based on any parameters, be it gender or any other parameters. So thank you all the speakers. My sincere thanks to all the team, WDC and Women's Study Center, our team members, Kavita Rana madam, thank you very much. Dr. Vaishali Godeswar, Dr. Swapna Joshi, Dr. Neeta Dhote, all these committee members were always cooperating and correcting each other. Sometimes at the last minute also, what Moshmi madam has said, that yesterday also we were fine-tuning certain things. So thank you, entire team of WDC and Women's Studies Center. My sincere thanks to all the volunteers, Jemima, Dipali, Pooja, Jash and Dev, for making this technical aspect, because we are the teachers, we may be knowing, I consider that all teachers are much better than me as far as technology is concerned, but I think students are far ahead of us, so they can handle this technology. So thank you very much for making this particular event a success. And technically, initial hurdles we had overcome. Because of Zoom, we had to switch on this Google Meet, but you handled very, very nicely. Thank you very much. And last but not the least, I am thankful to entire, the audience who has participated. It includes the students as well as all the faculty members. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. So we can end the meeting. We will be keeping the feedback